The Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer faces a mutiny as his MPs join strike picket lines ahead of two crucial by-elections tomorrow.
Good morning. It is 6 o'clock on Wednesday, the 22nd of June. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Leading our news this morning, Sir Keir Starmer is facing mutiny in his own party after 25 of his MPs, including 3 shadow frontbenchers, broke ranks to join RMT picket lines. The Prime Minister said yesterday the strikes were wrong and unnecessary and called for a return to the negotiating table.
It comes ahead of 2 major electoral tests for the Conservative Party, with by-elections in Redwall seat Wakefield and the Tory stronghold of Tiverton and Honiton. Our reporters will have all the latest from the crucial constituencies.
Inflation figures will be released within the next hour. We'll bring them to you amid warnings from the Bank of England that inflation could hit 11% after soaring to 9% in April. That's the highest level for more than 40 years.
And remember, you can get involved in all of our discussions. We are the People's Channel. Do get in touch. Email us, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us @gbnews.
If you're fed up talking about trains, listening about trains, if you're fed up talking about by-elections or whatever, let us know what is the news that matters to you. And we'll try and reflect that for you throughout the programme today. Remember, we're also on YouTube.
So our top story this morning, the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer is facing a crisis in his party ahead of 2 crucial by-elections in 24 hours. 25 Labour MPs, including 3 shadow frontbenchers, broke ranks to join RMT picket lines yesterday during the strike action.
So the Transport Secretary accused Labour and the unions of taking the country back to the 70s as these strikes pushed much of the country into lockdown.
Well, 2 crucial by-elections will take place in the next 24 hours, one in Wakefield, the other in Tiverton and Honiton, with the latest polling putting Labour ahead in both constituencies.
Welcome to Wakefield. This town that had been held by the Labour Party for decades was won by the Conservatives in 2019, a definitive seat in the Red Wall. The Tory candidate was Imran Ahmed Khan. He won by just over 3,000 votes. But just a couple of months ago, he resigned in disgrace, having been convicted for sexually assaulting a 15-year-old boy. I've been speaking to some of the big players in this by-election today. First up, it was the Tory candidate, Nadeem Ahmed.
The message I'm going is my own character. I'm 16 years, a local councillor here, non-stop, so I've been here. I am from the area, I've grown up here. I know many people and hopefully meeting many more people. I'm standing on my own credibility and my own character as an educator for 20 years. People will on the doorstep say, look, you know what, Nadeem, you're not the person previously. There's people that know me, that went to school with me, and they're giving endorsements saying, look, I know this person. I've worked with him for 20 years. I worked with him 15 years. I worked with him in Morrison's or wherever they've done. So I'm getting that credibility and it's coming across, and I'm just trying to get out to as many people as we can in the shortest amount of time.
I also caught up with the leader of the Lib Dem group on the local council.
We had a visit from Daisy Cooper, the deputy leader of the Liberal Democrats, and we've seen the sort of same favours and people from across the UK come through to help out.
What would be a good result for the Liberal Democrats here on Thursday? What is your aim?
I think our aim really is to make sure that within Wakefield that we are seen as a credible, serious party that is, capable of competing.
Now, we had hoped to speak to the Labour candidate here, Simon Lightwood. I'm standing outside his campaign headquarters here, adorned with union flags and Labour posters. Sadly, though, we're told by the local Labour Party here that Simon has COVID. They won't tell us exactly when he contracted the disease, but it means that he can't speak to us in person. Simon Lightwood, front and centre there. It's interesting, on his literature, there's Lisa Nandy, the Shadow Levelling Up Secretary, there's Louise Hay. There's lots of figures in the Labour Party, but no Sir Keir Starmer. Now, the Labour Party tell us that they're running a positive campaign, and the leaflets that they've provided here do seem pretty positive, but they're not the only leaflets that have been sent by the party. This leaflet appeared at the start of the campaign, attacking the Conservative Party, of course, for their previous candidate, Imran Ahmed Khan, a convicted sex offender, and asking the question, who will the Tories choose next? So lots of apathy, really, at this by-election. The turnout is not expected to be particularly high. Of course, there are 15 candidates standing on Thursday. Reporting from the Wakefield constituency, I've been Tom Harwood for GB News.
Thank you, Tom. Off those 15 candidates, they are Sir Archibald Stanton, Earl Eaton from the official monster raving Looney Party,
Nadeem Ahmed for the Conservatives,
Akif Akbar, who is independent,
Paul Pickardike from the Christian People's Alliance,
Mick Dodgson of the Freedom Alliance,
Jada Franson, an independent,
Jordan Gaskell for the UK Independence Party,
and David Hurdson of the Yorkshire Party.
Theresa Hurst from the English Democrats,
Christopher Jones from the Northern Independence Party,
Simon Lightwood for Labour,
Jamie Needle for the Lib Dems,
Ash Ruth of the Green Party,
Ashley Simon from Britain First,
and Chris Walsh from Reform UK. Here to discuss what all of this means and to add to Tom's report, political correspondent for the Daily Express, Dan Flavely. Dan, first of all, just before we get into the actual constituencies they're involved, you've got Keir Starmer saying to his members, not just members, sorry, his MPs, don't go to picket lines. 25 decided we'll do what we want. 3 of those are frontbenchers. What sort of problem does this give him?
Well, it's incredibly embarrassing. The first thing that a party leader needs to do is have party management. And the fact you send out an email giving quite strict instructions and it's just flagrantly ignored is humiliating. He now needs to work out exactly how he deals with this. The only real way he can do it is probably to sack them or ask them to resign. But he also has a problem that the Labour leader in Scotland, Anna Sarwar, who's democratically elected, was also on the picket lines. Keir Starmer can do nothing about him. But him going on the picket lines as well will now cause a problem for Keir Starmer. And on that one, there's nothing he can do. It's going to be embarrassing trying to win back voters on this.
OK, I mean, it might be short-lived embarrassment if he wins those 2 by-elections tomorrow, which the polls suggest he's going to do. I mean, obviously, it's not a given. If he doesn't, I mean, his position's probably untenable, would you suggest? But, you know, that could save him.
Well, it looks like Wakefield looks very strong for the Labour Party. It does look like it could win there. But just coming around the corner, we've also got this Durham police investigation on Beergate and whether Keir Starmer broke lockdown rules. He still insists he didn't, but he has said he will resign if they find that he did so and he's fined. We're expecting that to wrap up in the next week or 2. It could be that there's embarrassment from this, there's a bit of joy from him winning the Wakefield by-election, and he could come crashing back down to earth again if he's then found that he has to resign.
OK, so that's the Keir Starmer situation. If, as Isabel is saying, the polls look good for Labour, not so good for the Conservatives, what would that result long-term, if it went that way, mean for Boris Johnson if he was to lose both those seats?
Long-term, it's not great. There's no way the Tories can sugarcoat it. They will do whatever they can to try to play it down, say that this doesn't matter. It's not very good when you've got 2 seats that are in 2 completely different parts of the country. The north of England, a seat like Wakefield, are the sort of seats that won Boris Johnson the majority in 2019. Seats like Tiverton and Honiton in the south of England are Tory strongholds that have allowed them to build seats for a number of years. To lose both, in the long run, it's not looking good for the next election.
Well, you say that. I mean, Margaret Thatcher famously lost a number of by-elections at this stage in the electoral cycle and then went on to win a landslide, and they'll say it's just normal at this stage in the political cycle.
That's absolutely what they say. And to be fair to Boris Johnson, it's been quite clear for a while that it looks like the Conservatives are going to lose both these by-elections. It was clear when they had the confidence vote earlier this month. And despite that, a majority of MPs said they still had confidence in him. So they knew when going into that confidence vote that they'll probably lose these, and they stuck by him. If they lost these 2 as expected, I don't think we're going to suddenly see a load more of MPs turning around and saying he needs to go.
Well, we haven't seen or heard the last of Brexit. Brexit still plays a role in all of this, particularly in Wakefield.
Yeah, Wakefield, more than 2/3 of the voters in the constituency voted to leave the EU. So slightly bizarre that the Conservatives have got a candidate who in 2016 told a local newspaper that actually he regretted voting for Brexit and it was built on lies. It's not what voters in Wakefield are going to want to hear. It's a bizarre choice of a candidate.
Meanwhile, we've got inflation figures coming out in the next hour. The cost of living crisis, of course, a huge issue for voters at the moment. Lots of the papers talking about what that's going to mean for pensioners, what that's going to mean for public sector workers. What more can you tell us about all of that?
Cost of living is, without a doubt, the #1 issue across the country, particularly when it comes to these by-elections. In Tiverton and Honiton, a lot of voters, what they want to see is tax cuts. The Lib Dems are looking very strong there, and they've built a campaign built on local issues, saying that they want to bring down fuel duty, they want to cut taxes, and that's the sort of message that voters across the country want to hear right now.
Yeah.
People are looking at the highest tax burden in 70 years.
Indeed. Well, let's concentrate. Let's look at Tiverton and Honiton. We'll get more comments from you, Dan, after this, because we've heard from Wakefield. What about that other constituency, Tiverton and Honiton? The vacancy there was caused by the resignation of an MP called Neil Parish. You will remember him because he is the man who admitted to viewing pornography on his phone in the Commons.
Well, our reporter Jeff Moody has been to the constituency in Devon to find out what voters there have been thinking.
Tranquil, trusting and Tory. They voted Conservative here since the 1930s, but in this rural backwater, many traditional voters are now no longer going with the flow. And it's almost inconceivable such has been Conservative support here. They backed Brexit by 58%. They have an ageing population, 28% are over 65, and unemployment is low. But this by-election is not just about the policies. This is Conservative heartland, the rural agricultural southwest. It should be an easy win for the Conservatives. But talking to people on the streets of Tiverton and Honiton today, it's not the policies they're so concerned with, it's the man.
Partygate just exemplifies the attitude that seems to be that rules are for poor people, not for the governing body.
Fair enough, give them a fine. That's it. Don't have to be such a big thing and a big, oh, they've done wrong.
We need a very strong leader and one that will get things going, such as Boris Johnson did with the vaccines and all of those issues. You also need someone with integrity. And so that's why I haven't decided yet.
There's residue too from the resignation of their former MP, Neil Parish.
Extremely bad. Watching pornography when he should have been doing something else. He was supposed to be watching tractors, but he wasn't watching about tractors.
Well, I wouldn't lump together a whole party based on the acts of one individual, so I'm glad that he's no longer in Parliament. But yeah, I feel like the Conservatives is the main vote for like the Brexit supporting people.
We asked Labour and the Conservatives to talk to us. Both candidates said they're far too busy today meeting voters to talk to us. Well, busy they might be. The Conservatives have a 24,000 majority, but the Lib Dems are snapping at their heels, and that's making them anxious. At the Lib Dem campaign HQ, foot soldiers have been drafted in, and the party faithful are buoyed by an internal.
The first thing people tend to want to talk about is Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. People often want to talk about issues of a lack of honesty and integrity at the top of politics. And it's not about Partygate per se, it's more around what that represents. It's more about lies told to Parliament and the resignation of ethics advisors, for example.
At the last election, just 15% voted for the Lib Dems, 60% went to the Conservatives. Turning this around will be a gargantuan feat for the Liberals. They think they can do it. The voters aren't so sure.
Well, what's the alternative? Put it that way. I can't see an alternative at the moment. I think they're giving Boris a pretty hard time and he doesn't deserve it. By and large, he's doing OK.
And that's the question that people here are asking themselves. Is OK enough? Or is Partygate now just water under the bridge? Jeff Moody, GB News.
Gosh, it certainly looks very beautiful there, doesn't it?
Very beautiful.
Look, as Jeff was saying in his report there, we did offer the Conservative and the Labour candidates the opportunity to be interviewed for that report, but they both declined.
There are 8 candidates standing in Tiverton and Honiton, and here they are. They are Jordan Donoghue Morgan for the Heritage Party.
Andy Fone for Reform UK.
Richard Ford for the Liberal Democrats.
Helen Herford for the Conservatives.
Liz Pole for Labour.
Frankie Ruffalo for the Britain Movement.
Ben Walker for UKIP.
And Jill Westcott for the Green Party.
OK. So back joining us here, political correspondent for the Daily Express, Dan Flavey. Dan, the reason we're having this by-election is because of the resignation of the then sitting MP, Neil Parish. Before he tarnished his record, what sort of MP was he? Was he a popular man?
Neil Parish caused a lot of shock when it came out they had watched Paul in the House of Commons because he was a very popular MP. He was popular among colleagues and he was popular locally. They very much wasn't the sort of person they expected. In fact, he came on GB News once it had been known that an MP had watched porn and kind of said whoever it is should resign. No one knew it was him at the time, you know, because it just didn't seem like him. It was a great shock to local voters.
But, I mean, just give us a bit of a reminder about his own past, because although he had been a farmer for most of his life, he'd also been an MEP, hadn't he? And he'd been heavily involved in the local council, and he'd only really been an MP for a short period of time.
Yeah, that's true, but I think in a very short period of time he managed to build up a very good rapport. Because he was a farmer, and it is an area that has a lot of farmers there, it meant that he was reconnected with the local issues, and that really allowed him to build that base, which is something that future candidates will...
So could you really see it turn red?
I think it's unlikely we'll see it turn red. I think there's a fair chance it could go yellow. The Lib Dems are really trying to hone in here. In fact, Labour have almost decided to not campaign too much in Tiverton and Horton and focus their efforts on Wakefield, giving the Lib Dems a clear run at it. What's interesting is the Lib Dems have published earlier this year a roadmap to rejoining the single market in the EU. Now, there was more than 57% of Tiverton and Horton voted for Brexit. So it's an interesting choice that in a constituency that was so much in favour of getting out of the EU, a candidate who will support rejoining aspects of it could be the one they go for.
OK. Dan, thanks very much. Really appreciate your take there. Dan's the political correspondent for the Express newspaper. Thank you very much indeed. The time, 17 minutes past 6 o'clock. A very good morning to you.
Let's bring you up to date with the latest headlines. And the Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab, is introducing a new Bill of Rights to Parliament later today. If passed, the legislation will make the UK Supreme Court the ultimate decision-maker, able to overrule the European Court of Human Rights' decision to block removal flights to Rwanda. We'll be asking him more about all of that when he joins us on the channel here at 9:10 this morning.
A former advisor to the Labour leader warns there will be an explosion within the party if frontbenchers are punished for joining rail picket lines. Sir Keir Starmer is believed to be considering disciplinary action after banning MPs from joining demonstrations.
New research suggests that disabled households in the UK are being pushed into debt by spiralling living costs. The disability charity Sense says 54% of families are in debt and 38% are skipping meals to save money. I know it's early in the morning, but sometimes there are stories in here that, although they might put you off your breakfast, I just feel I have to share.
If you've woken up this morning scratching your face, that's a good thing. It's a good thing. Because these could be mites that your skin actually needs, as Isabel will now explain.
Yeah, I was just leafing through the paper and reading about these microscopic skin mites. They wake up at night and they feed on human sleep hormones, and then they mate on your faces. It might not sound like they're worth saving, but they actually...
Face. You mean as opposed to your faces?
Oh, yeah, your face. Yeah. And then they basically eat your acne. If you suffer from acne, you want these mites, and it seems they're dying out. Now, it's one of those things, you just, drinking your coffee, reading the paper, and I just couldn't quite believe what I was reading.
Yes. Do you ever wake up in the morning with bites and you've no idea where they came from?
Yeah, I don't like that.
You've no indication.
I'm quite a juicy person. Wherever we go as a family, no one else gets bitten and I get attacked by everything.
Yeah, they're like...
Mosquitoes.
Lovely.
Blood type. Yeah, why is it?
Well, it's to do with sexual hormone, really. That's what it's to do with.
It's so attractive.
Yes, apparently the more attractive you are...
That makes perfect sense. Yeah, got it. Sorted.
That is the way it is. We will stay with us and we'll be asking a psychologist how children and their parents can tackle the stress of last-minute exam preparation. I have no sympathy for this whatsoever. I don't.
Why? What do you mean?
We've all been there. We've all had to do it.
So why can't you be human and sympathise and empathise?
Suck it up. Suck it up. Get it done. We're going to be talking about it right after this. We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents. Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
2 minutes past 6. Thank you for your company, wherever you're watching or listening. This is Breakfast on GB News. Eamonn Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Still to come on our programme this morning, it's fresh produce season. So we're asking this morning how you can make sure that your fresh food lasts a little bit longer during this cost of living crisis. A few tips for you. We're speaking to a nutritionist who will be telling us how to get the most out of your groceries. That's at 6:45.
And coming up, inflation figures, they're due after 7 o'clock this morning.
They're not going to be good, are they?
Well, are they going to be as bad as 11%? That is the big fear. That would make it the highest inflation figures in 40 years. Our business and economics editor, Liam Halligan, he is the man. He will be here in the studio with his take on the numbers.
And remember, you can join in any of our discussions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
It's exam season. How do you know that? Because the weather is good. The weather's
so true.
Always good when it comes to sitting exams. I had the hottest summer on record then when I did my O-levels, which is what, GCSE level, in 1976. Just 6 weeks or so of just blazing sunshine.
Cruel, isn't it?
Having to revise during that. And
yeah, although I've got no sympathy for that argument, because you know what, you get through your exams and then you've got 6 to 8 weeks of nothing after, so chill out, unlike the rest of us who work all the time. What it would be to be young and have a summer off school.
So retrospectively, you have no sympathy for that?
Yeah. At the time, it's hard, but, you know, it's all in perspective.
But when you realise real life involves...
Just drudgery.
Yeah, it's drudgery all the time. But anyway, students right across the country next week, and many children and their parents will be feeling the pressure of this period, but so it has always been.
Yes, indeed. Well, joining us now to share some tips on how youngsters and their parents can cope with these last-minute stressful anxiety exams and all the period of preparing. We're joined now by the psychologist Emma Kenny. Very good morning to you. We should state the exams are underway for lots of students already. Really, look, Eamonn may not be very sympathetic, but it doesn't matter whether it was 30, 40 years ago. Exams are stressful. They are.
Yeah, they are stressful because there are certain kids who are really lucky. And certain children are excellent with memory because that's what these tests are. They're a revision and memory test. And other children and young people, that's just not their forte. It's not that they're not as bright. It's not that they're not as capable. It's that they are not able to meet those standardized tests in a way that other children are very fortunate to be able to do so. So it's kind of a mismatch on measurement. And I think that for a lot of kids, they don't feel that they necessarily get to prove themselves in those exams as they would wish to. And also, there are children who are born in the wrong postcode to the wrong parents without the right privileges. So it's not really an equal playing field. And don't get me wrong, the bit that Eamonn said before about we have to suck it up, to some degree, actually, that's not bad advice, because life is going to be full of these moments where it isn't a level playing field and it isn't fair, but it doesn't define you. And there are things that you can do mindset-wise to just say to yourself, you know what, maybe GCSEs and A-levels aren't going to show me in the best light possible, but that's cool. I've got a whole lifetime to prove myself, and I can prove myself in areas that I really want to thrive in. So it's actually quite good advice, just accept that this is part of life and growing up, and there are going to be other situations which are equally as difficult, but you'll overcome them.
Although, if, you know, as a parent, if I was watching you saying that, I'd be thinking, I hope my youngster's not watching that. I want them to think this is important. I want them to put their all into this. I want them to put every ounce of their effort, squeeze every bit of potential out of themselves to give them the best opportunities.
Yeah, but I think that the problem with that is whilst every parent wants that for their child, every parent wants their child to be the best gymnast, the best swimmer, the best runner. And that's great because every parent wants what's right and best for their child. But if you have a mismatch with the reality of what your child's experience is academically, and actually you're putting more pressure on them when it's not even that they're not trying, in fact, they're trying really hard, but they might not be able to achieve and attain what you want, well, that's not actually going to be helpful. Every parent needs to be able to motivate their child to work, to revise, get them doing schedules where they have breaks and where you can test them, get them to make flashcards so that they can constantly reference that memory and embed that memory. There are things that you can really do to help. But when it comes down to that classic, well, I want my child to be the A grader, if they haven't got that potential, not because they're not incredibly bright, but because they're measured very badly. What we don't talk about in our society is the fact that we measure children very badly. It's not a measure of intelligence exams, it's a measure of certain analytics based on memory. So your child is still going to be ultimately gifted at certain things. And I think for parents, your job is to be their biggest cheerleader, is to remind them that no matter what their gifts are, if they apply themselves to that, it might be art, photography, it might be running, it might be singing. If they apply themselves uniquely to that, no one can compare because they are absolutely a one-off. Every child is. And sometimes we get lost in that area of fear, and we don't need to, because if we all look back, most of us will have friends or individual experiences, certainly for somebody like myself, where it wasn't easy, academia. And it was something I found later on in life as I travelled down that road, where I realised that I'd found a subject that I loved. Before that, it was incredibly difficult. So reassurance is what parents need, that their children are good enough as they are, even if somebody doesn't grade them at an A level.
It's funny, most adults that you meet, everybody has memories of the period of doing their exams. As Eamonn was explaining, he remembers a very hot summer. I remember my headmistress coming into the school and sitting us down in the common room, and she had a very hushed voice, and we were all very respectful and a little bit afraid of her. And she basically quizzed each of us on what time we were going to bed. And it was absolutely drilled into us that we had to make sure we had a good night's sleep. How important is that, and what tips can you give to people, someone like me, who from a very young age developed insomnia as a schoolgirl because I was worrying about exams and keeping up and everything else? What advice would you give to people who struggle with that?
Yeah, so definitely good sleep is really important. If your child is struggling sleeping, make sure they have a bath 2 hours before they go to bed, really hot bath. It reduces and cools the body, and that actually helps you get to sleep. Make sure they're eating well, not having loads of sugary snacks. That's not going to be helpful. Make sure that they're taking lots of breaks when they're revising. The brain cannot compute and control and contain information when you're just overloaded with it. So get them outside. You know, if they're doing 40 minutes revision, make them go out in the sun. As you were saying, it's lovely weather. Get some white light on their skin. Also, sit down with them and reassure them that, like I said, no one's going to measure the whole them. Those exams aren't going to know that they're one of the kindest, most compassionate kids that potentially has the power to change the world down the line because of those qualities. Kind of reassure them that you love them in spite of their grades and that they're always going to have a safe place and a safe space. That goes a long way. Like you said, I think you absolutely stated it brilliantly. You look back, look how successful you are now, but look how anxiety-ridden you were at that moment in time. It's moments like that that we just need people to sweep in and say, it's going to be okay. Whatever happens, we'll find your A game. It might not be this A game, but we'll find it together. That's how you really help to navigate these difficult times. And don't get me wrong, there'll be kids out there now whose parents are just pulling the hair out because the kids have done no work. I know that's really tough. And when your kids fail some of those exams, that's going to be a real wake-up call for them. And that's helpful too, because you can always resit exams, but the life lesson you get where you realise you can't just wing it all the time, that can also be really helpful. But equally, for those kids who are trying, and as you said, staying up late, bring them back into check and remind them no matter what their grades are on that day, ultimately they have a whole life to lead and there is a plan B, C, D, E and all the rest of the alphabet and they're good enough exactly as they are.
Emma Kenny.
Advice, Emma. Yeah. Thank you very much indeed. That's the psychologist Emma Kenny there. Right, 6:30 is the time. Coming up, we're going to be going through the newspapers. We have got David Miller and we have Claire Muldoon after this.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Here are the headlines on this Wednesday morning. Train services will continue to be disrupted today as talks resume in a bid to resolve the dispute over jobs, pay and conditions. Only 60% of trains are expected to run, mainly due to a delay to the start of services, whatever that means. Members of the unions and 13 train operators are expected to strike tomorrow and on Saturday.
The Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary Dominic Raab is introducing a new Bill of Rights to Parliament later. If it's passed, the legislation would make the UK's Supreme Court the ultimate decision-maker, able to overrule the European Court of Human Rights decision, things like blocking the removal flights to Rwanda. We'll ask him more about this when he joins us at 9:10 this morning.
Prince of Wales will spend the day in Rwanda meeting survivors and perpetrators of the genocide back in 1994. Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall will visit the country's National Genocide Memorial, where they'll lay a wreath before attending a summit of Commonwealth leaders. Going through the newspapers this morning, we've got Claire Muldoon and we've got David Miller. And the thing that I want to ask both of them before we get into anything else is, Can you, Claire, stand on one leg for more than 10 seconds?
Flamingo. Is that what we're talking about? Standing like a flamingo?
No, we're going to talk about if you're likely to die.
Yeah.
Yes,
If you can't, you're going to die.
You know what? I can only do it if my eyes are open. I can't do it if my eyes are shut.
Well, that's
What are we talking about here?
So you'll die with your eyes shut.
Well, there we are.
It seems like that.
There
So
we
we're
are.
talking about this position here, David, and I can't do this, right? So I'm going to be dead in the next 10 years. Well, you can't see it so
But
small.
I'm not sure I'm comfortable with a conversation about whether you keep your eyes closed or whether you keep them open. But the fact of the matter is that I read that in the papers and I thought, I'm not going to depress myself by trying.
In other words, you can't do it. You can't
No, I still believe I can. I just haven't taken the opportunity.
I thought I could until I tried it. And then it was bad news.
But I think you can reverse it, which is encouraging.
Yes, I'm working on it already. I
have a dear friend who ran Chelsea Football Club for 20 years called Ken Bates. He was always 4 or 5 stone overweight. And it never bothered him a bit. The doctors must have said, you must lose weight. Anyway, he's just celebrated his 90th birthday. He's in the greatest of good health. And so, you know, what do we...
Well done him.
Say? Yeah.
Claire, we go to the front page of the Times. This could be any paper really today, but we're talking about as regards the strike and the negotiations. Where have they got?
Well, Johnson, apparently, according to the Times, is ready for the strike stalemate to last for months, and that is absolutely harrowing reading. Now, I do support what's happening. I do support the strikers. I do support the RMT. I think it's important that, as a narrative and as a country, we stop baiting each other, making others others. And it's not them and others. It's them and us. We're all together. You know, they've been striking for the past 3 years. They've not had a pay increase. They want an increment of 7%. As you know, inflation is heading towards 11-12% by the end of this year. But, you know, Prime Minister Johnson really has to take, you know, step from this. And we can't keep using language like battles or wills or stalemate.
Well, he can if he thinks it's going to win him 2 by-elections, can't they?
And the by-elections are happening.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I'm disappointed that Claire supports the strikers because it's perfectly obvious. And by the way, my grandfather was a railway guard, so don't think I talk from some elevated position above and beyond. In the days when railway guards had 3-piece suits and watch chains. Anyway, the reality is we've been here before. When you add to inflation an attempt for people to catch up with their wages, you end up, where would it get to under Labour and Michael Foot, 25, 26%? And I mean, I just think that people, and also, you know, one looks at this chap from the RMT, you know, tight suit, estuary accent, no hair, and I think I've seen that guy before, 50 years ago, and you think, what are they trying to do? And we know what they're trying to do. And there's a piece in one of the papers, the Daily Express, which we'll come to. They're trying to get rid of Boris. Now, look, I'm quite in favour of getting rid of Boris.
Come on, that's
but
not
they are
true.
trying to get rid of Boris. This is a politically motivated strike. Because throughout the history of my interest in politics, it was Harold Wilson who once talked of a group of humans being a tight-knit group of politically motivated men who were trying to bring down the government. It's what the trades unions do.
No, that's not the only thing they do. They've got a very, very important role to stick up for
Jobs.
the worker and jobs and rights and human rights.
Well, one thing they're not going to keep is jobs on the railways. If an already bankrupt entity losing £2 billion a year actually then prices itself out of the market.
Well,
and how many people are going to put up with the railway?
The railways were run not only by National Rail, which has now been renationalised, but also the private companies that owned the franchises for the actual lines. They're the ones that were running them. The private sectors are giving in some industries, in the private sector, are giving pay increases of up to 25%. That's huge amounts of money going through the economy. And all this is doing is making the schism between the rich and poor even bigger.
So you give them 7%, and then what, do you give them 9% or 10%? Or someone else comes in for 15%?
No, David,
where does it stop?
No, it stops at this, because we haven't had strikes like this in such a long time. And I, for one, am in favour of the common man, the common woman coming out and striking for what they believe in. And it's protection. That's exactly what it is.
The truth is, though, in this debate, we're not just talking about the railway networks versus
lots of other people.
It's lots of others. And so there is actually a third party or 5, 6, 7, 8 other parties involved in the negotiation. And that has to be born into this whole debate. It's not just about the railways, and so that's what the government's got in the back of their mind the whole time. Interesting that you were talking about how this is being sort of politically motivated to bring down Boris. The Mail's take on it is actually that the reverse might be happening in terms of the Labour leader, and actually it's exposed severe weakness in Keir Starmer, many of his own MPs defying him. What's the Mail saying, David?
As millions of ordinary Britons suffer in rail strike mayhem, 25 left-wing Labour MPs defy their party by joining the picket lines. And the reality is both party leaders have got real problems. And the trouble with Keir Starmer, I mean, he is a lawyer. Now, I'm a lawyer. I'm not proud of it. I used to tell people I was a pianist in a brothel, but I'm really a lawyer. But the point is that lawyers can argue one side of the case. You pay them a bit more money, they'll argue the other side of the case. And I think the problem for Starmer is, what are his fundamental beliefs? We need to remember that this is a man who claims to be very moderate, but of course he was the spokesman throughout the last election for Jeremy Corbyn. He's a man for all seasons. He's a vicar of Bray, and I think he's caught out here. And that's what a lot of the papers...
Well, he's now got 25 MPs, including 3 front benchers who have defied him about joining picket lines. What does he do about that, David?
Well, I think he's got to sack them, hasn't he?
He won't, though, will he?
No, of course he won't.
And of course, he's probably going to win Wakefield, which will be a bit of a relief, given all of this publicity.
Yes. Mind you, Wakefield should never have been... I remember when Wakefield was the seat of the long-serving deputy chief whip of the Labour Party. And if I'd said to him, listen, Mush, in a few decades' time, your seat's going to be Conservative, he'd have thought I'd gone mad. He'd have bought me a pint and said, get over it, boy.
You could say that about a lot of the Red Wall, but
yeah, of course. But how long is it this Red Wall has become an obsession? Is it a temporary phenomenon, or is it something permanent? The danger is the Red Wall becomes a justification for the Borisites to spend a lot of money we don't have, because apparently the Red Wall people expect to be bribed with their own money. I'm not sure they do, but that's the theory of it, you know.
Claire, where do you stand on pensions? A few papers are getting hot under the collar that the state pension and benefits are going to rise in a double-digit figure. We assume 10%.
Yeah, double-digit rise for state pension and benefits after the Chancellor saying he wasn't going to increase anything. So this comes news, and that's why it's in the front page of the Telegraph today. The fundamental belief in this is that if pensions increase by X amount of money, then the benefit system would increase as well on the RPI. And I know my mum's quite happy about this, but was there not a report last week that said the state pension age was actually increasing by another 10 years or something? And was that news? Did we expect that? Whatever. Again, as David has mentioned, in many, many weeks of doing this, Boris is the Prime Minister of spending. This is a spending government, which goes completely against Conservative policy. Where is the money coming from? I mean, we keep saying this, we keep asking this question. You know, we've got the double-digit state pension benefits on the front page with a desolate, solitary child in a railway station. I just don't know.
But if you're going to give pay rises to anybody, surely the weak, the vulnerable, the people who are on a state pension are exactly the sort of people and people in benefits that, you know, who have got fixed...
But where is it going to stop?
Yes, but where does it start?
Well, you can't do tax cuts in that case, presumably. And the question is whether, if you really think that pay restraint's the way forward, then pay restraint has to be the way forward for pensioners and people on benefits as well.
Exactly.
Because otherwise that stokes inflation in turn.
Yes, so it's sending out it's sending out different messages. They keep compromising themselves, I think. And it's it's policy of duplicity.
So you're against whatever the paltry sum is on the state pension per week? I can't remember. What is it?
10% is what they're...
No. Well, how much is it a week?
At the moment.
It's 134 quid or something or whatever. So you're against that going up by 10%?
No, I'm not. I just don't know where the money's coming from, and I don't understand why they say 1 minute...
Fracking.
They're not...
That's what we've got to do.
They're not going to do it, and then...
Sorry, my ears are bad. What did you say?
Well, fracking.
Oh, fracking.
Fracking.
Thank you.
Fracking. When are we all going to wise up and realise? You know, everybody, the army wants more recruits. They want more armaments. The NHS want more money. The fire brigade want money. The train drivers want more money.
Want more money because fracking, that the money generated from it would probably all be filtered overseas anyway.
Well, let's try it. Let's try it. I doubt it. We could be the new Dubai.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Macron, David. Telegraph, page 16.
Oh.
He's having a shocker. You think Boris is having a bad time or Keir Starmer?
No, Macron is having a bad time. Now, I didn't think we get that far now, so I'm going to have to... I'm going to have a quick... Yes, you did. It's not hard, you know. My age and stage. It's quite easy, I'm afraid.
It's page 16.
Yeah, I got it. No, I got it. I have actually even read it.
Just bored,
right. Macron's humiliation, as indeed mine, will only get worse. The president's disdain for his political rivals will come back to bite him now he's lost his majority, says Anne-Elisabeth Moutet, my favourite French woman, by the way, because she... I mean, what she's really
is, actually.
Who is she?
She's a French political correspondent.
Yes, for the Telegraph. But basically, what she is saying is that Macron has won, but he didn't really win. Macron won because he was the least bad option, but he hasn't really won in terms of the hearts and minds of the French people. And that basically, Macron has now got not only a strong opposition that he didn't have before, but a number of his allies, like Chirac's old party, are no longer prepared to go behind him. So he's basically lost an enormous amount of support, which will cost him dear. And what she says at the end, she says, France is a country stuck in populist gridlock. 5 years ago, Macron was supposed to be the solution, beyond parties, beyond left and right. The coming chaos in Parliament is the result of his own personal failure. And things are only going to get worse for him. As the old Hollywood saw goes, he's about to encounter, falling down, the many, many people he disdained during his rise. I mean, I love this. It couldn't happen to nicer people, could it?
It's lovely poetry, but I always think in instances like this, we talk about Macron, but actually it's the French people who will suffer because the legislation won't necessarily be able to get through because there's such disagreement and chaos. It's not good for anyone.
Well, I could cope with it with the French. I could. I'm sorry to say. I love their wine. I love a lot of the other things they do.
Cheese.
But as the actual people, I could do with that.
Shocking.
Guys, OK, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. Claire and David will be back in about 45 minutes' time. Just a reminder as well, just at 7 o'clock, we're going to have the latest inflation figures. And as they come in, we were talking there just about pay rises and inflation, 11%. They're predicting that it could reach. So we've got Liam, who's going to be our economics guy on this just after 7 o'clock as well. But up next, nutritionist Olivia Parry will be joining us on how to tell you how to keep stuff in your fridge fresh for longer.
Actually joins us now. Very good morning to you. Look, one of my favourite tips is how to revive a floppy broccoli by popping it in a glass of water and seeing it come back to life. Lots of tips like this can mean that during the cost of living crisis, we can keep our fruit and veg a few days longer than perhaps we ought.
Yes, that's an interesting way of putting it. Well, it's about keeping things fresh and keeping them lasting longer, absolutely. But you've also got to consider the health and safety. So you don't want to have fruit flies on your strawberries if you leave them out. So, there are certain fruits that are best left outside of the fridge, but I would say only for a couple of hours just before you eat them. There are actually spores on berries that can spoil. So I would, especially in temperatures like we have nowadays, it's going to be 26 here where I live in Surrey today. So I wouldn't recommend you keep them out more than a couple of days before they spoil. But there are certain other fruits that you can leave out. I mean, for example, I've got a tangerine in my fruit bowl and I bought it at Christmas and it's still okay. So citrus fruits, you can leave out. Other tropical fruits like pineapples, they can keep out, and melons. When you cut into them, then it's much better to put them in the fridge.
Did you say a satsuma or a tangerine from Christmas would be really dry and all sort of rindy?
No, it's still plump as anything, which just goes to show, you know, how long some fruit can last. And again, apples in the fridge, they can last up to months.
Where do you stand on bananas?
Well, Yes, I actually did a little bit of research. I don't actually eat bananas myself. My husband does. We keep them in the fruit bowl on the ledge in the kitchen, and they do tend to go brown, which doesn't look very nice, but they taste okay. You can actually put them in the fridge, and the skin protects them, so they're safe to eat. Yeah. Do you like bananas?
They don't. Yeah, yes, I do. I do like bananas very much, and as particularly, I suppose, in smoothies and things like that, where I find out the browner they go, the softer they go. That's the best place for them. I suppose.
You can even freeze them. You can even freeze them, and then if you put them in a smoothie, it kind of gives the smoothie it's a bit like a frozen drink.
Let's have the frozen fruit and veg debate then, because we were talking about it in the newsroom this morning, and is it really still as good to take your fresh produce out of the freezer? Are you sure? I just can't bring myself to believe that it's still all the nutrition and everything is just as good.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I was speaking to Alistair Stewart, I think, back in January about how to save money on the cost of living crisis, not only with vegetables and frozen fruit, but also with things like meat, like minced beef and chicken. If you look at the comparable prices, it's an easy way. And also, meal planning and preparation, doubling up, trebling up, quadrupling up, putting things in clip-top food containers with a label on, saving time as well as money, making a meal or two in advance. So that's a really good way to save money.
Yeah, it's interesting listening to you, Olivia, because we're also used to sell by dates and use by dates and whatever. And talking to you, I'm getting this sense of intuition that you will know. You will know the feel, the smell. Your instinct will tell you, is this good to eat and to use or not, without a label telling you so?
Yes, up to a certain extent. I mean, I think dairy products you have to be a bit more careful with, things like cream and milk. But yes, I mean, we know best. It's a bit like I say to my clients when I'm helping them with their nutrition plan and their weight loss. If you don't like the food, and it might be healthy, if you don't like it, it's not going to work. Food is delicious. We need to enjoy it. We need to get away from this. This isn't allowed. This is a diet. This is unhealthy. Instinctively, eating food that nature provided us is the best option. Eating when we're hungry, stopping when we're full. It's just common sense, but it seems there's a lot of experts out there who seem to want to kind of rain on your parade and say, "Oh, this is so bad." No,
Is eating seasonal vegetables really just a kind of middle class thing? Is it affordable? Can anyone do that? Say, well, we'll only have asparagus at this time of year, and we'll only have artichokes at this time of year, and it's all sustainably grown and organic, but actually that's out of reach of a lot of people.
Well, not necessarily. If you eat British apples and British strawberries, personally, I don't eat imported strawberries anymore, only British, because they just taste so much better. They really, really do. You don't need anything with them. You can just eat strawberries on their own, fresh. And tropical fruits as well, they're not the healthiest anyway, because they're very, very full of sugar. Even though it's fruit sugar, it still turns to fat if you're trying to lose weight. So, I mean, yes, it makes sense to eat locally grown and support your local market if possible. So I would say, yes, try and eat seasonal.
When I was growing up, as a child, that fruit and vegetables were only seasonal. You didn't get stuff imported in from the rest of the world. But
very good thing is to eat how your parents and your grandparents used to eat.
Yeah,
just makes sense.
But an interesting thing here, Olivia, raspberries grown in Britain, the season is getting longer, right, because of the decent weather we've had. We've had a settled spring and whatever it is. So apparently you can buy British raspberries from the start of June through to the end of October. And people like raspberries, it appears. And not only that, the settled weather and the better weather is making our raspberries bigger and sweeter and more plump and juicy. as a result.
Exactly.
I like raspberries.
Do you know? No.
If you don't have any fruit trees in your own garden, in my last house I used to have a damson tree.
I had one growing
They're
up.
nowhere near as sweet as the fruits that you buy in the supermarket because they have been engineered for sweetness. It's like a lot of the apples that are available now. They've been specifically engineered for sweetness. So, yes, I mean, it's absolutely true what you say. What we ate when we were children was so healthy, even for me,
Okay. Well, thank you very much indeed. Olivia knows all about nutrition. She's telling us there how to keep your fresh food items as long as possible during the warmer weather as we get well into the summer. Thank you very much indeed, Olivia. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Do you know what I don't think we talk about enough is growing your own veg. I don't have a lawn, but you do. You could have a little veg patch.
Yes, you just hit the right word. I have a lawn.
Yeah.
That's what a lawn is for.
Yeah, but you could just...
It's for stripes.
You could just take a little corner of it, put some sleeper beds in.
I'm not against that.
Bed,
yes.
Have some tomatoes.
I admire
you could have
people
some
who
runner
do that.
beans. I actually, we walked past allotments to my children's school,
Yes.
and I saw big fat artichokes growing, and I thought, I wish I could grow some fruit and veg in my garden.
Now, an artichoke. What is the point of an artichoke?
Oh, you just cover it in butter, and it's delightful.
What is it? What's the taste of?
Well, it's a bit sort of, it's like a nutty avocado-y flavour, very... No, it's lovely. A bit edamame-ish, yeah, sort of edamame nutty. It's really nice as a starter.
What on earth is an edamame?
Oh, for goodness sake. You need to learn your vegetables.
What, an edamame?
Edamame bean, little green beans you get.
Sounds Japanese.
Edamame.
Is it Japanese?
Yeah.
Well, why would we be growing Japanese beans?
No, I'm trying to describe the flavour of an artichoke.
Never tasted an edamame. I'm just saying, it's ridiculous.
What
are you
is?
talking about? No, I agree that you can grow apples or you could grow carrots.
You don't want to grow artichokes.
Edamame. I'm going to grow my edamames.
I didn't say that. I said they taste like that. Anyway, let us know. Would you like to grow your own veg? Do you grow your own veg? Any tips for this guy? He's got a huge lawn.
Excuse me. I used to grow veg. I used to grow quite a lot, yes. Yeah. The easiest thing you can grow is potatoes. Yes, right, potatoes. Lettuce is very good, except that you've got to worry about slug pellets, right? Because hedgehogs eat slug pellets and then they die.
That's terribly sad.
That's terrible torture for poor little hedgehogs. You've got to find natural ways of doing that. But then, of course, the biggest problem I have on my lawn is my dog, which wheezes on it.
No, you need a raised bed for your vegetables with some sleepers. I've got it all planned.
You keep missing the point. I'm idolising my lawn and you keep talking about vegetables.
Yes.
So the lawn dies when the dog wheezes on it.
Oh, right.
But apparently it doesn't die when a male dog wheezes on it.
It's only for bitches.
It's only for bitches. And that's how acidic or whatever their wee is, which maybe sums up life in general there.
There we go.
Yes.
Double whammy.
All the bitterness that comes from within. Here's the weather.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer faces a mutiny as his MPs join strike picket lines ahead of two crucial by-elections tomorrow.
Hello, folks. Good morning. 7 o'clock is the time. It's Wednesday, the 22nd of June. Breakfast on GB News. Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. Sir Keir Starmer is facing a mutiny in his own party after 25 of his MPs, including 3 shadow frontbenchers, broke ranks to join RMT picket lines. The Prime Minister said yesterday the strikes were wrong and unnecessary and called for a return to the negotiating table.
Now, that comes ahead of 2 major electoral tests for the Conservative Party with by-elections in red wall seats Wakefield and Storey, Stronghold, Tiverton and Honiton. Our reporters will have all the latest from these constituencies very shortly.
New inflation figures are released in the next few moments amid warnings from the Bank of England that it could hit 11% after soaring to 9% in April, its highest level for more than 40 years.
Join in any of our discussions today, and you've been very good so far. We were talking about exams and exam stress earlier on. Linda says, I'm with you.
Read that one, wouldn't you?
Well, okay, maybe we won't read that one.
I'll read Jeff's then.
Keith says, I was terrible at exams and my parents just told me it didn't matter what my results were as long as I tried my best, as long as I tried 100% and was happy with how I did.
I think that's key, as long as you do your best, but I can't bear it when people don't try.
You've done your best, son, but you're stupid.
Yeah, that's all right. You can't do anything about that. Yeah, but if you've got a kid that's idle,
you're lazy,
and not
son,
their
but you think you've done your best.
Linda says, I totally agree with Eamonn. Jeff says, we're with Eamonn on this, so I'm not reading those. Stuart says, I left school at 16 after not taking any exams. I knew deep down that I wanted to be a salesman and exams were not going to help. I've been extremely successful in my career choice, and though there were bumps in the road, I wouldn't change a thing. Neither of my children, in spite of expensive schools and all the privileges, are academic. And I don't worry about it at all.
The difference is, Stuart, you were focused, you were directionalised, and I'm a great believer in this. I think we don't spend enough. It's almost regarded as a fault if someone from a young age knows what they want to do. I can't stand people who are 32 years of age and think, I haven't decided yet what I'm going to do. I might do another course, and then you just don't know. It takes me a while to find myself. You should know from 10, 11, 12 what you want to do.
Just because that's what you
and
did.
If you do, you stand a better chance of succeeding. Like Stuart, he knew what he wanted to do, and he did it. And my respect, my congratulations to you, rather than people who end up until they're 65.
And can I just do a little shout out for the girly swats as well? Nothing wrong with that. Just saying.
My God. Girly swats is a thing.
Yeah.
There's no boy swats.
Well, no, it's just well known that girls are really swatty. Girls are
spotty or swatty, or both.
We digress.
What?
We digress.
We don't digress.
I'll explain, but we don't have to talk about
Don't
Labour.
digress. So again, it's another sexist term that only girls sort of study and boys don't.
What, are you feeling left out? You want to be
Mrs. Feminist, I just sit here and listen. Everything's fine as long as men are rubbish.
I'll explain it all to you in the advert break. It's too long to explain right now.
Well, Keir Starmer's got a lot to explain. So he says to his people, don't go on picket lines. And 25 of them do, including 3 front benchers. So this is all ahead of 2 by-elections in the next 24 hours. They're going to happen tomorrow.
So there were 25 Labour MPs who disobeyed him, including 3 shadow front benchers, and they joined the RMT picket lines yesterday during that strike action.
So what's he going to do about it? Let's go to the first of those by-elections, Wakefield. Our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, has more.
Welcome to Wakefield. This town that had been held by the Labour Party for decades was won by the Conservatives in 2019, a definitive seat in the Red Wall. The Tory candidate was Imran Ahmed Khan. He won by just over 3,000 votes. But just a couple of months ago, he resigned in disgrace, having been convicted for sexually assaulting a 15-year-old boy. I've been speaking to some of the big players in this by-election today. First up, it was the Tory candidate, Nadeem Ahmed.
The message I'm going is my own character. I'm 16 years, a local councillor here, non-stop, so I've been here. I am from the area, I've grown up here. I know many people and hopefully meeting many more people. I'm standing on my own credibility and my own character as an educator for 20 years. People will on the doorstep say, look, you know what, Nadeem, you're not the person previously. There's people that know me, that went to school with me, and they're giving endorsements saying, look, I know this person. I've worked with him for 20 years. I worked with him 15 years. I worked with him in Morrison's or wherever they've done. So I'm getting that credibility and it's coming across, and I'm just trying to get out to as many people as we can in the shortest amount of time.
I also caught up with the leader of the Lib Dem group on the local council.
We had a visit from Daisy Cooper, the deputy leader of the Liberal Democrats, and we've seen the sort of same favours and people from across the UK come through to help out.
What would be a good result for the Liberal Democrats here on Thursday? What is your aim?
I think our aim really is to make sure that within Wakefield that we are seen as a credible, serious party that is, capable of competing.
Now, we had hoped to speak to the Labour candidate here, Simon Lightwood. I'm standing outside his campaign headquarters here, adorned with union flags and Labour posters. Sadly, though, we're told by the local Labour Party here that Simon has COVID. They won't tell us exactly when he contracted the disease, but it means that he can't speak to us in person. Simon Lightwood, front and centre there. It's interesting, on his literature, there's Lisa Nandy, the Shadow Levelling Up Secretary, there's Louise Hay. There's lots of figures in the Labour Party, but no Sir Keir Starmer. Now, the Labour Party tell us that they're running a positive campaign, and the leaflets that they've provided here do seem pretty positive, but they're not the only leaflets that have been sent by the party. This leaflet appeared at the start of the campaign, attacking the Conservative Party, of course, for their previous candidate, Imran Ahmed Khan, a convicted sex offender, and asking the question, who will the Tories choose next? So lots of apathy, really, at this by-election. The turnout is not expected to be particularly high. Of course, there are 15 candidates standing on Thursday. Reporting from the Wakefield constituency, I've been Tom Harwood for GB News.
So 15 candidates standing in Wakefield, and here they come.
Sir Archibald Stanton Earl Eaton from the official Monster Raving Loony Party.
Nadeem Ahmed for the Conservatives.
Akef Akbar, who's independent.
Paul Bickerdike from the Christian People's Alliance.
Mick Dodgson of the Freedom Alliance.
Jada Franson, an independent.
Jordan Gaskell for the UK Independence Party.
David Hurdson of the Yorkshire Party.
Therese Hurst for the English Democrats.
Christopher Jones, Northern Independence Party.
Simon Lightwood for Labour.
Jamie Needle for the Liberal Democrats.
Ash Routh of the Green Party.
Ashley Simon from Britain First.
And Chris Walsh from Reform UK.
So, Tom Harwood will now tell you about the mood on the ground in Wakefield. Tom, we've gone through the whole list of runners and riders there. What are the issues, or does it simply boil down to, who is your party?
Do you know what? It's so interesting here in Wakefield, speaking to people that have been milling about the town over today and yesterday. There seems to be a general sense that they wish it was all over, that people have been absolutely hounded by the extraordinary number of parties standing here and the extraordinary number of leaflets that they have sent. I think there'll be a general sense of relief after Thursday when the by-election circus leaves town. But it is interesting talking to people about the issues that they care about, the issues that they'll be voting on. Clearly, local issues in this by-election play a big part. Clearly, weighing heavy on the minds of voters here is the conduct of the previous MP, and it would be remiss to dismiss exactly the causes of this by-election, why this by-election is being held in the first place, which is, of course, the former Conservative MP left Parliament having been convicted as being a sex offender. But there's also local issues. There's concern about the local state of the NHS. There's concern about bus routes. There's concern about antisocial behaviour here in Wakefield as well. And that's before we get on to those national issues as well. We've spoken to people who've raised the migration crisis, indeed the government's Rwanda policy, train strikes, inflation, the rest of it. I think really what we're going to be seeing in terms of how people vote tomorrow here in Wakefield will be a mix of both the local and the national.
OK, and just give us a picture of which one is almost more treasured or more significant in terms of Boris Johnson.
It's interesting, Boris Johnson was meant to come up here on Friday, but of course, as part of that sort of red wall visit to a conference and Wakefield, that was all cancelled in favour of a visit to Kiev in Ukraine. I asked the Conservative candidate about that, and he said he understood why the Prime Minister felt he needed to abide by his international commitments, and he received a phone call from the Prime Minister over the weekend, sort of apologising for not being here. Although it's interesting to note the Prime Minister does feature on Conservative Party leaflets, something that isn't true in reverse. The Labour Party leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has visited Wakefield twice, but he doesn't appear in the Labour Party literature, which I found to be quite interesting there. I spoke to a couple of voters yesterday who thought that Sir Keir Starmer was a little bit too London-centric for somewhere like Wakefield, who didn't quite fit in with how the town thought, and perhaps that's being reflected in the literature that the Labour Party have been focusing on, really local issues. Their pledge card that they've produced, the first pledge card that Labour seem to have done since the Blair era, has been focusing on local policies, keeping open a health centre, reopening bus routes, these sort of things, rather than focusing on those national issues. So it's really interesting to see how those party leaders play on the ground. And of course, there have been two opinion polls that have been publicly released in the last 2 months over the course of this by-election campaign. They do both put the Labour Party with quite a considerable lead.
OK, Tom, let's break off from you in Wakefield in Yorkshire there, and we do that. We will be in Tiverton and Honiton very, very shortly, but the new inflation rates have just been announced, and Liam Halligan here with the exact figure. Liam?
Morning. Well, inflation is up, only marginally, but it is up. Inflation was 9% in April 2022. That means it was a 9% price increase on average compared to April 2021. In May, it's 9.1%, so no respite, still very, very high inflation. And what's really catching my eye isn't only the consumer price index, which I just cited, which reflects prices in the shops. What's catching my eye, just looking at the ONS database here, the Office for National Statistics, is what economists call the PPI, the Producer Price Index. That shows the costs that businesses are shouldering. The Producer Price Index, Eamonn, in May was 20.9%.
Oh dear. And that has to be passed on somewhere.
It doesn't please me to say it, but the Producer Price Index is a very good indication of where inflation is heading.
Yeah.
I'm not saying inflation headline Consumer Price Index is going to be 20%. It was when we were kids back in the 1970s, of course. I'm not saying it's going to get to that this time around, but at least some of those producer price rises will have to be passed on or businesses will go bust.
The context of all of this, of course, we had the Bank of England last week announcing interest rates. It was perhaps a smaller increase than some people were calling for. Perhaps then, in light of the inflation figures today, that seems proportionate, that we're coping with it in the right way. Would you agree?
I think, for my money, I mean, I think that's a generous interpretation to the Bank of England. This 9.1% number, it's still more than 4 times the Bank of England's inflation target. The Bank of England's inflation target is 2%. What's actually happened since last week, Isabel, is for the first time in a while, a proper debate has broken out among those 9 economists who are the Monetary Policy Committee, who determine what interest rates will be. They'd been all buttoned up. There'd been no dissent. People like me were writing in newspaper columns. They were guilty of groupthink and acting too slowly. You've now got a bit of a debate breaking out because there are members of the Monetary Policy Committee who think we should be raising rates faster and further. And if we do that sooner, that means you can get your arms around this inflation. You can push it back down. The authorities are saying double-digit headline inflation will not be tolerated. And if you don't do that quicker, in the end, you've got to raise interest rates for longer.
Does this does this intervene in any way in the pay negotiations that the rail unions are undergoing at the moment, or do we just know this is going to get higher, so it doesn't really matter?
Well, Network Rail, backed by the government, of course, on one side of the table, can't say, oh, inflation's peaked at 9% because now it's gone up further, and they'll have economists looking at the producer price index too, as I just did. I think it's fair to say, and I've written this in newspapers over recent weeks, I do think inflation will peak quite soon. I don't think the numbers start to drop out, if you like. If something's really expensive one year, by definition, if the numbers come down just a little bit, you get a percentage fall in inflation. But for my money, I don't think we're going back to 2%, 3% or 4% inflation anytime soon. I think post-pandemic, there's still many, many issues in global supply chains. I think now people are expecting higher wage rises. We're now used to numbers like 4%, 5%, 6%, 7%, 8% inflation, which for 20 years we weren't. And that's why it's so hard to squeeze these inflation expectations out of the system, out of pay bargaining, out of the supply chain, out of businesses setting their costs. Any small business owner will know what I'm saying. And that's another reason why, in my view, it's a personal view, but I'm not alone, the Bank of England needs to act faster.
And just a thought about, I mean, this argument's being written in lots of the papers about whether or not pensions and indeed benefits should stay in line with CPI, which would see them increase by, say, 10% or whatever inflation may be in the autumn. Some debate about how you can argue that at the same time as saying there should be pay restraint within the public sector.
Think back to that spring statement by Rishi Sunak here on GB News. The moment he gave his statement, Gloria DePierre and I were presenting, we said that can't stand. And what we were talking about was when the Chancellor said he would uprate benefits from April this year to April next year by just 3.1%. Back then, the government was forecasting 7% inflation. It's now 9%, pushing towards 10%. I think it's politically unsustainable to have benefits going up by only 3.1% when inflation is this high. I do think they're going to have to make a move in the autumn to uprate those benefit payments.
Well, you know, bear in mind these benefit payments are about 180 quid a week. So, you know, these are people who rely on that solely. And I think there's a lot of people won't disagree with what you're saying there. Keep crunching those numbers. We'll talk to you again in an hour's time. Thank you. 17 minutes past 7 o'clock. This is Breakfast in GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel. Webster.
We're going to take a look now at how that inflation rate rise could affect small businesses. An organisation in Newcastle called Charity Escapes helps charities find businesses to support their fundraising. They say they're feeling unprecedented demand from charities for help due to inflation.
Well, let's go to our North East of England reporter. That's Rachel Sweeley. Rachel is live in Newcastle Quayside. Rachel, how hard is inflation hitting the charity sector?
Good morning. Well, 9 out of 10 charities say they're worried about the impact the cost of living crisis is having on the people who use their services, as a massive 60% of us plan to cut discretionary spending. Now, joining me now is Carly Sells, who is Director of Charity Escapes. Carly, tell me a bit about the organisation and how inflation is affecting you.
Sure. So, Charity Escapes matchmake businesses who are willing to donate products and experiences to charities who hold fundraising events. We've been operating for just over 5 years now, but in the past few months, the volume of inquiries, emails and calls for help we receive from charities wanting fundraising tips and guidance has gone through the roof. It's been unprecedented. Now, today's figures are going to impact charities in many ways. One way, for example, is any pre-existing grants that they had secured will slowly be eroded and chipped away at. The reality being that last year, £100 last year is worth closer to £90 this year. And then, of course, there's just the general increase in the cost of living. We're all experiencing that, be it at the pumps or the supermarkets, gas, electricity, and it's no different for charities.
And of course, we saw those figures that £380 has been added to people's yearly grocery bills. What message do you have for people who are just tightening their belts so much?
It's understandable that priorities can change. Say, for example, if that household had previously given £10 or £20 a month via direct debit to charities, you can quickly see where gaps in fundraising could begin to emerge. We would just encourage people to help charities in any way they can and get out and support them in their community, be it through time or anything else that they can offer.
It's a knock-on effect, isn't it? How is this putting pressure on you and your organisation?
Yeah, we're a very small, dedicated team, and we've never been busier. We would like to appeal to businesses up and down the UK to come forward and work with us and provide anything that they can to help us help the charities at their fundraising events, no matter how big or small that can be. A small thing can make a really big difference.
Carly Sells, Director of Charity Escapes, thank you so much. So yeah, it's not just households that are feeling the pinch in the cost of living crisis. It's very much a big deal for charities too.
Massive deal, Rachel. Thank you very much indeed. Just when people are squeezed, they've just got less to give away, and it's the charities that are hit first by that sort of thing. 7:20 is the time. The news situation stacks up like this.
The Justice Secretary, Dominic Raab, is introducing a new Bill of Rights to Parliament later today. If passed, the legislation will make the UK Supreme Court the ultimate decision-maker, able to overrule the European Court of Human Rights' decision to block removal flights to Rwanda. We'll ask him more about that when he joins us on the programme at 9:10 this morning.
A former advisor to the Labour leader warns there will be an explosion within the party if frontbenchers are punished for joining rail picket lines. Sir Keir Starmer is believed to be considering disciplinary action after banning MPs from joining demonstrations.
New research suggests disabled households in the UK are being pushed into debt by spiralling living costs. The disability charity Sense says 54% of families are in debt and 38% are skipping meals to save money.
Just want to paint you a very broad picture of what's happening and what way it's looking politically, the political temperature in Wakefield and Tiverton and Honiton. We've already visited Wakefield this morning. We now go down south to Tiverton and Honiton, and we have got the vacancy there caused by the resignation of the MP Neil Parish. Neil Parish admitted to viewing pornography on his phone in the Commons.
Well, our reporter Jeff Moody has been to the constituency in Devon to find out what voters are thinking.
Tranquil, trusting and Tory. They voted Conservative here since the 1930s, but in this rural backwater, many traditional voters are now no longer going with the flow. And it's almost inconceivable such has been Conservative support here. They backed Brexit by 58%. They have an ageing population, 28% are over 65, and unemployment is low. But this by-election is not just about the policies. This is Conservative heartland, the rural agricultural southwest. It should be an easy win for the Conservatives. But talking to people on the streets of Tiverton and Honiton today, it's not the policies they're so concerned with, it's the man.
Partygate just exemplifies the attitude that seems to be that rules are for poor people, not for the governing body.
Fair enough, give them a fine. That's it. Don't have to be such a big thing and a big, oh, they've done wrong.
We need a very strong leader and one that will get things going, such as Boris Johnson did with the vaccines and all of those issues. You also need someone with integrity, and so that's why I haven't decided yet.
There's residue too from the resignation of their former MP, Neil Parish.
Extremely bad.
watching pornography when he should have been doing something else. He was supposed to be watching tractors, but he wasn't watching about tractors.
Well, I wouldn't lump together a whole party based on the acts of one individual, so I'm glad that he's no longer in Parliament. But yeah, I feel like the Conservatives is the main vote for like the Brexit supporting people.
We asked Labour and the Conservatives to talk to us. Both candidates said they're far too busy today meeting voters to talk to us. Well, busy they might be. The Conservatives have a 24,000 majority, but the Lib Dems are snapping at their heels, and that's making them anxious. At the Lib Dem campaign HQ, foot soldiers have been drafted in, and the party faithful are buoyed by an internal poll that puts them level pegging with the Tories.
The first thing people tend to want to talk about is Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. People often want to talk about issues of a lack of honesty and integrity at the top of politics. And it's not about Partygate per se, it's more around what that represents. It's more about lies told to Parliament and the resignation of ethics advisors, for example.
At the last election, just 15% voted for the Lib Dems, 60% went to the Conservatives. Turning this around will be a gargantuan feat for the Liberals. They think they can do it. The voters aren't so sure.
Well, what's the alternative? Put it that way. I can't see an alternative at the moment. They're giving Boris a pretty hard time and he doesn't deserve it. By and large, he's doing OK.
And that's the question that people here are asking themselves. Is OK enough? Or is Partygate now just water under the bridge? Jeff Moody, GB News.
And as Jeff Moody said there, we did offer the Conservatives and the Labour candidates there the opportunity to be interviewed for his report, but they both declined. There are 8 candidates that are standing in the by-election, and these are their names.
Jordan Donoghue Morgan for the Heritage Party.
Andy Fone for Reform UK.
Richard Ford for the Liberal Democrats.
Helen Herford for the Conservatives.
Liz Pole for Labour.
Frankie Ruffalo for the For Britain movement.
Ben Walker for UKIP.
And Jill Westcott for the Green Party.
OK, so what's the latest situation with the trains today? They will eventually get back to a normal-ish timetable. Let's go to Paddington Station, which is just across the road from us here. Ellie Costello is there for us this morning. Trains running yet, Ellie?
Good morning to the two of you. Yes, today is Wednesday, therefore not a strike day. But what we're seeing here in Paddington Station is a Sunday service. There's about one train running every hour. And what you have just missed, actually, is a huge scrum to get onto platform 4. Loads of festival goers, but I'd say about 500 people with their tents and their suitcases and their backpacks. They are heading down to Glastonbury Festival, which starts today. It goes on till Sunday. There was big concern amongst that group of people. I was talking to some of them this morning that they might not even get on that train. There's only one per hour. It's actually remarkable how many managed to squeeze onto that train that left at 7:15. So I'll just get out the shot so you get a sense of the station now. You can see that people are already building up for the next train at about 8:15. But there is a warning that around the country people could still face 4-hour delays. Despite the fact that it's not a strike day. National Rail has warned that its services will be thinner due to that knock-on effect of yesterday's industrial action. Signallers did not work their night shifts last night. It does mean that trains are not going to be in the right place today. Many stations up and down the country, they weren't opening until after 8 o'clock this morning. So there is still going to be some disruption on the trains and the tubes as well. Several tubes aren't opening until after 8 o'clock this morning. There was a separate industrial strike on the tube network in London as well. So lots of disruptions still this morning, hoping to ease off throughout the day, but really there's going to be disruption for the rest of the week.
OK, Ellie, thank you very much. Stay with us. We're going to take a quick break. After that, we'll have Paul Coit in the studio. He'll take us through the back pages, all the latest sports stories, including Anthony Joshua's boxing comeback. That's after this.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents. Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Let's go through the back pages now. Paul Coit, as usual, here to discuss the latest big stories, and let's show you those. Back page, Paul, first of all,
yes.
of The Sun. Anthony Joshua says he will reign as the comeback king. So August the 20th, there's the rematch signed and sealed for Jeddah against
Alexander Usyk.
Usyk, yeah.
Yeah. Because that was the fight at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium back in September, and Anthony Joshua, of course he's going to talk a good game. Of course he's going to say that he's going to come back and he's going to win. The chances, I'm not really so sure. I mean, the first fight, which was really interesting, and as far as Anthony Joshua is concerned, he just didn't really do what we expected him to do and make the most of it. It was almost, he turned it into, it sounds like a ridiculous thing today to say it was a boxing contest, but Usyk was always going to win that. And Anthony Joshua almost tried to outbox Usyk, which was a mistake. Usyk ends up winning. So, of course, there's a rematch because there always is in these. And that's going to be out in Saudi Arabia. So not so much a big deal being made about the fact that it's in Saudi Arabia as there is as Live Golf at the moment, which is interesting. It's still the same thing. It's still the same money, which is being thrown at it. But it's almost like, oh, we've already mentioned that. So now we're going again. That doesn't really matter.
So the sports laundering continues there. I mean, Joshua was saying basically, if you know me, you know my story, you will know I am the comeback king.
Well, we'll see. He has done that before against Andy Ruiz Jr., but this Usyk is a different kettle of fish altogether. This is going to be a very tricky fight. But the winner, we still wonder, is going to face Tyson Fury, because Tyson is saying that he wants $1 billion to fight. You know, that he's not going. Although he'd said he wasn't going to fight again. I mean, I'd be amazed if he actually is retired. But we'll see who wins. August the 20th, I think it'll take some beating of Alexander Usyk, but Anthony Joshua obviously believes he's going to do it.
Yesterday on the programme, your interview with the Liverpool wing-back Alan Kennedy, and he was talking about the trauma of the Champions League final because he was caught up in all of that as a fan. So now Liverpool fans, they were in Paris yesterday and they were giving evidence to the French Senate about all of this. Back page of the Mirror today, we were treated like animals. They reveal horrific treatment in Paris. They call on the French Home Secretary to quit.
Yeah, because what he's done, I mean, which is incredible. Gerard Darmanin, they're calling for him to quit because still he stood up and actually said,
oh, well, it's because of the fans. There were 30 to 40,000 ticketless fans. There was disorder. He's still going with the same narrative, basically saying that it was the Liverpool fans' fault, which is amazing, really, because anybody who was there. And when we spoke to Alan yesterday, I mean, Alan said to us, didn't he, that he was in fear that he was actually going to die. It was
his testimony was harrowing.
I mean, it really was. And this is a guy that's been through so much and a tough guy. And for him to be able to say that and been to so many games, you know it must have been bad.
Yeah.
So for the French Home Secretary to be saying this, whether he's going to turn it into a political issue because he knows it affects him and affects his office, this is the reason he's defending it. But I just so hope that UEFA are going to see this for actually what it truly was. Whether we're actually going to see the truth, or, well, we're going to see the truth, but whether they're going to admit to it, I don't know, but it certainly can't happen again.
Back page of the Mail, England given a bit of a scare ahead of tomorrow's third test. Ben Stokes, the captain, so he pulled out of practice yesterday, felt unwell.
Yeah, well, obviously, as soon as anybody feels unwell, the first thing you think of is, hang on, is it COVID? Could it be? Could it be? He's had a COVID test. Apparently he's fine. We'll just have to see whether he's fit to play tomorrow. Let's hope so. It's been brilliant so far because under Brendan McCullum and Ben Stokes coming in as captain, they are playing. This is what I've been saying about England rugby and England football. They're playing which we want them to, what we want rugby in England to do. They're playing with the shackles off. They look relaxed. They look like they're enjoying it, and it's making a difference to the way they're playing, and they're winning games. So go into the third test on.
With Wimbledon about to start, Emma Raducanu is not enjoying things, and we've got an editorial from an interview with John McEnroe inside the Mail, and he said, I was right about Emma. It was too much for her, because we're talking about everything, not only her fitness, but her mental strength as well, her panic attacks.
Yeah, I think he got a bit of a bad rap for this. I don't know how you feel about it, but after it happened, and then Emma, she's come from nowhere, of course, 18 years old at the time, and then within a week, she's live on BBC One. They've taken EastEnders off, they've put the Raducanu game, and anybody would be thinking, this is just a lot. So she's losing the game. And then it was mentioned, you know, she won't be able to play on because she's got breathing difficulties. And I think there's many of us that have suffered through panic attacks in the past and know exactly what it's all about. I mean, I watched it and I just thought, I know what's going on there because I've been through it too. John McEnroe comes out and says, this is what was happening. Is she mentally tough enough? Now, that sounds like an insult, but it's still true. Because if you're going to get to the very top of your game, you have to be incredibly mentally tough to be able to get through these situations. You know, he wasn't saying it was a bad thing. He was saying that's what happened and the fact that she'd had a panic attack. It now has come to pass that that was the reason, that's what happened. And it was too much for her at the time. So he's just now, a year on, saying, well, you know what? I said this. I got a bad rap for it because everyone's going, how can you dare say such a thing about such a young tennis player? It was true. Emma's admitted to it as well. But obviously now we expect more from her because after the US Open, and she's more used to it, but it's understandable what she went through as well.
5 days to go now before Wimbledon gets underway next Monday. So we're all looking forward to that.
Absolutely.
Paul, got to leave it there.
Okay.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Stay with us. We'll be going through the papers. Claire Muldoon, David Miller, doing that right after this short break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
OK, it's time to go through the papers. It's 7:39. We're joined again by the broadcaster Claire Muldoon and former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, David Mellor. Welcome back to both of you. David, you've chosen a story inside the Telegraph talking about the Russia threat, and this is about Putin's latest claim that his new missiles that are particularly alarming could reach us as early as this year.
Well, I think that we mustn't forget this serious issue with Russia bubbling away. This is just a little story in the Telegraph, but it makes the point that Putin is busy sounding off, warning yesterday. It says here that Russia would deploy its newest intercontinental ballistic missile capable of reaching Britain in 3 minutes. And of course, there's also...
It goes by the ominous name of Satan II.
I know. The Russian leader's saber rattling, says the Telegraph, comes amid a showdown with EU member Lithuania. Remember, most people don't know this, including indeed myself, I have to tell you. But there's this small enclave that's the other side of Lithuania, which is part of Russia.
Stalingrad.
And my God, honestly, it's so impressive. Anyway, thank you. Yes, I believe you. But the point is that this little enclave has to be serviced from Russia, and Lithuania has refused, on the basis of EU sanctions, to accept stuff coming through on the railways. And of course, needless to say, Putin and all those ghastly people. I mean, you guys are statesmen compared to the people on Russian One or whatever it's called. I mean, shouting the odds. The question is this just entertainment? Is this just somebody sounding off because they like the sound of their own voice? Is there something serious behind all of this? Now, the papers are not sure, and nor, for that matter, am I.
Satan 1, I think, is probably Putin himself. Satan 2 being these missiles. But you can't doubt it, can you? You have to take the threat seriously if he has that capability, given that he's done pretty extraordinarily awful things already.
And if he really is dying of various diseases that are lined up to be getting him, would he like to take the rest of us with him,
But what is the defence against something that could reach us in 3.5 minutes?
No, there isn't. It's mutually assured destruction.
Yeah.
And so what he would have to be told is, before yours hits us, ours will hit you.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt about it. In terms of the ability of the West to take out almost everything that moves in Russia is far superior to anything he could do. But he doesn't have to do very much to destroy our whole civilization.
Well, hopefully we wouldn't know much about it if that does happen.
It's worth. I watched a documentary on Sky last night about Putin, and if you think he was bad, you know nothing. I mean, you multiply it by 100. This man is.
Yes.
Oh, I just couldn't begin to talk about his commitment and how he sees himself, and he intends to win.
You're absolutely right, because you see, having had my career when I was young, and then I became the youngest has-been ever invented. But, I mean, I was actually a Foreign Office Minister responsible for Russia and Eastern Europe, Soviet Union, before the fall of the Berlin Wall. And we used to meet these old guys with terrible sort of degenerative diseases.
Yes.
And, I mean, they were not frightening. And they were really very cautious people. Some of the fellows, there was a succession of them that ran Russia towards the end, before the arrival of the great hope Gorbachev. But, Putin is a different kettle of fish. I mean, Putin, I believe, is I mean, I think he really is a madman and getting madder by the moment. Because absolute power corrupts, absolutely. If you ever want a good example of that, step forward, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin.
There was all that intelligence that showed that was it the first week or the second week after the invasion, there was actually an attempt on his life. Wasn't there some evidence that came out?
Yeah, but then he sits 5 miles apart from... He goes near no one. He stands beside no one. So he's frightened that someone's going to stick a knife in him, shoot him, or whatever.
Or infect him with
something. Or infection as well.
Remember the photo op with him and Macron, the table the size of this, either end, and we said at the time, here's a man who clearly doesn't take many risks for himself, and yet he's willing to risk everything for this war.
And he has a fortune, you know. Always used to say to people like Abramovich were his bag carrier.
Well, probably is he, if you actually calculated it all, his assets, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, when he'd ever get around to spending. But that's why you have to ask yourself, what are he or the people that have attached themselves to him, what are they doing? They've got a wonderful life, exploiting a whole country and with riches beyond the dreams of avarice. Why do they want to think that threatening to push a button somehow helps them? Because it doesn't.
Claire, the rail strike, you've chosen The Guardian. This is page 7.
Yeah, and this...
effects of the train
Yeah, well, it segues actually into what David was mentioning there. And the state of history today, yesterday was the history GCSE. No irony lost there. Now, after the first segment today of today's paper review, some people on Twitter are saying, you know, I'm surprised at you, Claire Muldoon. How could you have, you know, come and you say you support the working man, but what about the workers who couldn't get to work yesterday? Well, I'm a freelancer. I couldn't get to my one of the other jobs I had on yesterday because of the rail strike.
Yeah.
And I certainly didn't put it down to, well, they should be taking me to work. No, we're so divisive in this country. We need to come together. And here's quite a nice, heartening story. These students held sleepovers with classmates. Parents organised car-sharing rides and teachers drove minibuses to ensure that those affected by the national rail strike yesterday would actually make it to their exam on time. And I think that's really, really lovely.
Sleepover before an exam?
Well, they're lucky to have the exams. They were more excited, I bet,
I'd be
for actually
if my
sitting...
child was forced to have a sleepover before
Isabel,
one of the most important exams.
Well, that's why you school your kids close to where you live, so you don't have these issues. And the buses were running yesterday. So there was 280,000 pupils in England and Wales took their GCSE yesterday, and there was no impact at all from the strike for them getting to their exam. Good luck.
I never went to sleep before exams because I hadn't done any studying, so I just waited the night before and stayed up all night.
Did you actually do it, though, the night before? I just assumed, knowing you, that you've just always just had this innate intelligence.
I mean, you didn't have to study, did you? Come on, you just went in and
I can always remember not sleeping, and then you just hit the ground running during the exams. Trouble was...
That's why you do what you do, then.
Well,
the peculiarities of genius.
No, I wouldn't go that far. I mean, and especially if you had 2 exams in the one day, that's when you come off the rails. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you thought, no, maybe this wasn't such a good idea. But
mercifully, I've forgotten all of that.
Yes, we've forgotten everything.
Yeah,
David,
everything.
can we talk about the story in the Daily Mail? Really shocking, more details of this really tragic shooting of these 2 kids in Texas. And it emerged that they, quite frankly, a vast majority of those poor, sweet, innocent children could have been saved.
Absolutely dreadful, actually. This is from Daniel Bates, their correspondent in America, in the Daily Mail. According to police records, Ramos, 18, entered school at 11:33, walked into classroom 111 and began shooting. The time stamp on the CCTV shows that by 11:52, the officers were in place outside. By 12:04, they had been joined by others. What time did they go in?
No idea.
12:38. After which 19 little kids were dead and 2 teachers. And you think the theory of America, certainly the sort of empty-headed theory of the wretched Trump, is that as long as the goodies are armed to the teeth, you don't have to worry about the odd baddie getting into a school. Well, when the head of the security is a man called Pete Arredondo, and I don't fancy his chances for the future, when you have people, and these men armed to the teeth were frightened of an 18-year-old boy, because I suppose in the world of guns, if someone else has got a gun, a lot of people are frightened of him, even if they're themselves armed to the teeth. But it's awful, and it shows the ridiculous premise on which America bases all of this, which is, you know, if the goodies have a gun, It doesn't matter if the baddies have guns.
Well, you're a bigger one. Why did they wait? Do we know what they were waiting for?
They were worried about being shot.
They're also basing the premise on, in America now, the gun lobbies are targeting the youth in America, particularly youth, young men. And they're saying, you know, arm yourself up. You know, you're cool. You need to protect your family, your possessions. Let's have a gun. And there was a report also in this country that the algorithm set for lots of social media, TikTok, Snapchat and Instagram, were targeting kids as young as 13 for knives. Can you believe that?
No, I absolutely can.
It's absolutely unbelievable, I think.
And the problem with
and it's legal.
You know, the problem with these guns is it's one thing to have a gun, a little gun, to protect yourself in America, but they don't do that. You can have an assault rifle capable of firing off God knows how many rounds a minute, and that accounts as self-defense weapon. I mean, but America, you know, we all go to hell in our own different way. America are going to hell because they cannot control the gun, and so the guns are controlling them.
Yeah. Guys, got to leave it there. And when next time round, Claire, I want you to talk about why restaurants are too loud.
Yeah, I will.
A lot of them are old banks and things, and they've got very high ceilings, and it creates a little bit of an echo chamber. But the other thing is, everywhere we go, music. There has to be music. Why can't you just eat in silence? You know?
Well, that sounds so atmospheric, romantic.
No, but no, at lunchtime.
Are you setting the scene for something that might happen in the future?
I'm saying I don't like noisy. I don't like noisy restaurants.
Eamonn is of the view that when he goes out to a meal with somebody, all they should want to do is listen to him.
No,
and he's probably right. Far more entertaining than any background music I've ever heard in my life.
What did you say? What? Yes. And
Eamonn used to get really angry at Ruth because Ruth wouldn't let him eat until she'd taken a picture of what she ate, and he used to get really cross at that.
Used to. Her Instagram's full of meals. It does irritate the heck out of me. She'll go to sit down to eat and she's taking a picture of it. Anyway, guys, more in 40 minutes' time. Out you go, because we're going to talk about hay fever now, so we are.
We're going to do a quick update, actually, on the headlines. Train services are continuing to be disrupted today by those rail strikes as talks resume in a bid to resolve a dispute over jobs, pay and conditions. The walkouts by rail workers are expected to continue tomorrow and on Saturday.
Former advisor to the Labour leader warns that there will be an explosion within the party if frontbenchers are punished for joining rail picket lines. Sir Keir Starmer is believed to be considering disciplinary action after banning MPs from joining demonstrations.
The Prince of Wales will spend the day in Rwanda meeting survivors and perpetrators of the 1994 genocide. Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall will visit the country's National Genocide Memorial, where they'll lay a wreath before attending a summit of Commonwealth leaders.
Today is the 22nd of June. It's Wednesday, 22nd of June, otherwise known as Hay Day. Hay Day. Hay Day is the worst day of the year for grass pollen, which leads to misery if you suffer from hay fever.
Well, we're joined now by Dr. Apelles Akons, who's a specialist in allergies. Thank you. I hope I pronounced your name correctly there.
Very good.
Give it a good go. Look, it seems to me, and this is from a sort of layman's perspective, as though hay fever is getting worse. It's getting more widespread, and I don't know if that's because I'm in a very polluted city or if there's any link with just getting warmer and higher temperatures. What's your take on it?
It's a very good point. It's known that pollution creates microcrystallization, and that increases humidity above cities. That holds particles in the air. We're affected. And when they did a study many years ago to compare pollen in cities compared to pollens outside in the countryside, they found that, surprisingly, the cities had worse pollen prevalence and allergies.
Gosh, OK, so if you're in the city, then you might not be mad if you're feeling like you're really suffering with hay fever at the moment.
But the irony is, I mean, we don't really associate cities with trees and grass, and they are the big villains in all of this.
That's right. Can I just mention that hay fever is a misnomer, first of all. There's no fever and no hay.
Yeah.
It's mainly tree pollens, usually starting in the early spring, and carry on till the late spring, and also grass pollen this time of the year, June, July. We know that the single most important factor in the prevalence of pollen is humidity. Humidity means that the environment is damp. This morning, coming from West Sussex, I thought that there was visible fog. That's the evaporation of water, makes everything so much more airborne. Whereas going to a southern country, for instance, like Mediterranean, you lose that phenomenon because their rainfall is much lower.
Is it possible to look at hay fever as almost two different versions of it? So if you live in Manchester or Newcastle or here in London, compared to where you live or came from this morning in West Sussex, there are different sorts of treatments. So, for example, you could take local honey in somewhere like West Sussex and you might get some immunity to it, but that's not true in city centres. Am I right?
Some people have found this quite useful, but the evidence is anecdotal.
Oh, really?
I don't think scientific enough to rely on that.
Quite like the idea that these fix this problem.
Absolutely.
Well, one way to fix it, of course, is to shower regularly. Your hair, your clothes, you know, throw them into the wash. So give people that advice, people who are suffering throughout the day.
Good point. Usually we have the exposure in the daytime, and when we go back home, this is the time where the symptoms come in earnest. And of course, washing, having a shower and changing clothes and having an air purifier at home can make a big difference.
Can it?
Yeah.
Yeah, we want to know all those tricks. I mean, people who do, thankfully I don't suffer from it, but not that you can get confident about that, because I believe you can contract it at any stage in your life.
Well, the good news is that hay fevers don't last more than 5 to 25 years. You don't see many elderly people having hay fever these days. And some other good news is that the testing for allergies and the treatments, preventative treatments for allergies has become more common in the last 20 years. In the mid-80s, we went back to the dark ages as far as allergies is concerned, and what happened is the medical profession gave up testing people, let alone treating them. Right. Now we see that coming back, and GPs and hospital departments, they've got readily available tests, and also some of them offer some treatments.
And doctor, can you be vaccinated against it?
Absolutely.
Yes?
There are, we call this desensitization or immunotherapies, which aim to give tiny doses of different allergens in order to stimulate these allergy cells to perform better, to stop fussing about different things in the air, because they exaggerate the reactions they have.
I'm surprised I don't hear more about that. I hear about antihistamines, we talk about washing the pollen from your hair and your clothes and that sort of thing. But if a number of relatively simple injections, because it would get rid of the misery, and it is misery for those who suffer from it, why aren't we hearing more about that? Why isn't that more widespread?
Part of that is because the initial immunotherapy, which was injectable or subcutaneous immunotherapy, cost some lives in Britain, and that gave it a bad name. That has been succeeded or evolved to sublingual immunotherapy, which is extremely safe. Mm-hmm. But also there are some other treatments which are considered outside of the conventional medicine, which are not publicized in mainstream medicine.
Okay. So happy Hay Day. Well, I hope it is, if you follow what the doctor had to say there. But that's what it is. 22nd of June reaches the peak, the worst day of the year for grass pollen. So that's going to affect you if you do suffer from hay fever. Thank you very much indeed, doctor. Appreciate it.
Stay with us. We're going to have more on those crucial by-elections in Wakefield and in Tiverton and Honiton in the next 24 hours. That's after 4 o'clock.
Good morning, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office, and it's another fine start for most of us. A beautiful day to come, sunny for the vast majority and very warm. But there's always an exception, and this time, once again, it's the north and west of Scotland, where weather fronts nearby will bring thicker cloud at times and some spots of rain. For the vast majority elsewhere, high pressure keeps things fine, keeps things sunny for the most part. And plenty of sunshine is expected across England, Wales, and actually eastern Scotland seeing much sunnier skies compared with yesterday. Northern Ireland, western and northern Scotland will keep the mostly cloudy conditions, but even here, in places, mainly inland, it will brighten up. But, has to be said, it will be much cooler towards the northwest with a breeze, 15 Celsius for Stornoway, 12 for Lerwick. However, mid-20s for eastern and eastern Scotland, northeast England, and high 20s towards the southeast of England. Into the evening, and mostly we keep the clear skies, but again, areas of cloud, some low cloud at times, and some drizzle for the likes of western Scotland, perhaps some more persistent rain for Shetland. Could be the odd shower brushing the south coast, but for many it's a clear night and it's a warm night. 16 Celsius in the south first thing Thursday, with I think further north even for Glasgow, Belfast 13 or 14 Celsius. And Thursday starts off with plenty of sunshine first thing. Eastern Scotland, much of England and Wales, blue skies from the word go. There will be some showers emerging across southern counties of England into South Wales perhaps. That could have a knock-on impact for the temperatures. I think the highest temperatures expected further north into Yorkshire, 29 Celsius for example. But cooler once again for the far northwest of Scotland, and those cooler conditions spread countrywide on Friday. A spell of rain followed and preceded by some heavy showers.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
On radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
it's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer faces a mutiny as his MPs join strike picket lines ahead of by-elections tomorrow.
Good morning. It's 1 minute past 8 on Wednesday, the 22nd of June. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Leading the news this morning, Sir Keir Starmer is facing mutiny in his own party after 25 of his MPs, including 3 shadow front benchers, broke ranks to join RMT picket lines. The Prime Minister said yesterday the strikes were wrong and unnecessary and called for a return to the negotiating table.
It comes ahead of 2 major electoral tests for the Conservative Party, with by-elections in the Red Wall seat Wakefield and the Tory stronghold Tiverton. Our reporters will have all the latest from the constituencies.
Inflation figures are just out. They've risen to 9.1%. That's a 0.1 increase from April, not as high as predicted, but we will discover what that means for all of us.
And as ever, we would love to hear from you. Get in touch the usual ways. Join the conversation. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews. Lots of you have already done so, I should point out. Someone's coming in on how to save your lawn from female dogs when they empty their bladders.
Yeah.
What tips have they come out
Some
with?
good advice on this one. I've got a lot of people saying give them a mixture of anything that has tomato sauce in it, or apparently the enzymes in tomato sauce or ketchup even Well, how you get them to eat ketchup, though, I'm not too sure. But neutralises, this is a female problem as opposed to a male problem. Male dogs can wee in your lawn and not kill your lawn.
Jill says easiest way to
female
get them to eat
dogs
tomatoes is a tin of sardines in tomato sauce.
Oh, right.
Shirley says, have you ever heard of dog rocks? You can get them from your vets or online. They're Australian rocks. You put them in your dog's water bowl and it neutralises the urine and therefore saves your lawn. See, top tips. You've saved us again, once again.
Good.
And Colin in Gillingham's got in touch on healthy food. We were talking about whether or not you could use part of your lawn to grow some healthy veg. Eamonn, Colin says, my wife's lost 50% of her garden now to garden produce. However, she loves the organic food garden to plate. So far, lettuce, sweet peas, spring onions, potatoes, kale to come, beetroot, courgettes, cucumbers, strawberries, to name but a few. It is great fun and to be recommended.
Yum, yum. Yum, yum. Top story this morning, the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer faces a crisis in his party. This is ahead of the 2 crucial by-elections which are going to happen tomorrow.
25 Labour MPs, including 3 of them from the shadow front bench, broke ranks to join RMT picket lines yesterday during the strike action.
So, 2 chances then to have their say on government for voters. Let's go to our political correspondent Tom Harwood, who's got more from one of the constituencies, Wakefield.
Welcome to Wakefield. This town that had been held by the Labour Party for decades was won by the Conservatives in 2019, a definitive seat in the Red Wall. The Tory candidate was Imran Ahmed Khan. He won by just over 3,000 votes. But just a couple of months ago, he resigned in disgrace, having been convicted for sexually assaulting a 15-year-old boy. I've been speaking to some of the big players in this by-election today. First up, it was the Tory candidate, Nadeem Ahmed.
The message I'm going is my own character. I'm 16 years, a local councillor here, non-stop, so I've been here. I am from the area, I've grown up here. I know many people and hopefully meeting many more people. I'm standing on my own credibility and my own character as an educator for 20 years. People will on the doorstep say, look, you know what, Nadeem, you're not the person previously. There's people that know me, that went to school with me, and they're giving endorsements saying, look, I know this person. I've worked with him for 20 years. I worked with him 15 years. I worked with him in Morrison's or wherever they've done. So I'm getting that credibility and it's coming across, and I'm just trying to get out to as many people as we can in the shortest amount of time.
I also caught up with the leader of the Lib Dem group on the local council.
We had a visit from Daisy Cooper, the deputy leader of the Liberal Democrats, and we've seen the sort of same favours and people from across the UK come through to help out.
What would be a good result for the Liberal Democrats here on Thursday? What is your aim?
I think our aim really is to make sure that within Wakefield that we are seen as a credible, serious party that is, capable of competing.
Now, we had hoped to speak to the Labour candidate here, Simon Lightwood. I'm standing outside his campaign headquarters here, adorned with union flags and Labour posters. Sadly, though, we're told by the local Labour Party here that Simon has COVID. They won't tell us exactly when he contracted the disease, but it means that he can't speak to us in person. Simon Lightwood, front and centre there. It's interesting, on his literature, there's Lisa Nandy, the Shadow Levelling Up secretary. There's Louise Hay. There's lots of figures in the Labour Party, but no Sir Keir Starmer. Now, the Labour Party tell us that they're running a positive campaign, and the leaflets that they've provided here do seem pretty positive, but they're not the only leaflets that have been sent by the party. This leaflet appeared at the start of the campaign, attacking the Conservative Party, of course, for their previous candidate, Imran Ahmed Khan, a convicted sex offender, and asking the question, who will the Tories choose next? So lots of apathy, really, at this by-election. The turnout is not expected to be particularly high. Of course, there are 15 candidates standing on Thursday. Reporting from the Wakefield constituency, I've been Tom Harwood for GB News.
So who are those candidates? Well, they are Sir Archibald Stanton Earl Eaton from the official monster raving loony party.
Nadine Ahmed for the Conservatives.
Akif Akbar, who's independent.
Paul Bickerdike from the Christian People's Alliance.
Mick Dodson of the Freedom Alliance.
Jada Franson, who's an independent.
Jordan Gaskell for the UK Independence Party.
David Hurdson of the Yorkshire Party.
Therese Hurst from the English Democrats.
Christopher Jones, Northern Independence Party.
Simon Lightwood for Labour.
Jamie Needle from the Liberal Democrats.
Ash Routh of the Green Party.
Ashley Simon from Britain First.
And Chris Walsh from Reform UK.
Well, Tom Harwood again, he is there in Wakefield, as you saw this morning, so he's going to bring us up to date on what may make a difference as the sun shines. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning from an absolutely splendid day here in Wakefield. The town is looking glorious this morning, at least the older bits of it, which I'm delighted to show off on GB News. Sometimes we see a lot of these red wall seats and broadcasters like to show all the dingy bits. Well, I think it's nice to sometimes show the best of British as well. It's really interesting here at this by-election because we're expecting not the highest turnout in the world tomorrow. A lot of people that I've been speaking to here in Wakefield are pretty apathetic with the process of the by-election, thinking that really they've been pounded with so much literature from, frankly, so many different parties. They'll be pretty happy by the time it is all over. That's not to say there haven't been important political issues going on today, however, because of course the Labour Party and the Tories are battling it out here. The Tories won it by just over 3,000 votes in 2019, having been in the hands of the Labour Party for decade upon decade. There have been 2 polls in the last 2 months, and the Labour Party have led in both of them, expected widely to snatch this seat back from the Conservatives. I suppose we'll need to dig into the numbers on Friday morning, although the Conservatives are saying that those polls came out more than a month ago and that since then they believe the race has tightened. It'll be really interesting to see who is right and which narrative wins out tomorrow.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you very much indeed. We've heard from Wakefield there. What about Tiverton and Honiton? The vacancy there was caused by the resignation of Neil Parish. And what was the problem there?
Well, he admitted to viewing pornography, of course, didn't he, in the House of Commons. And our reporter Jeff Moody has been to Tiverton and Honiton in Devon to find out what voters there are thinking.
Tranquil, trusting and Tory. They voted Conservative here since the 1930s, but in this rural backwater, many traditional voters are now no longer going with the flow. And it's almost inconceivable such has been Conservative support here. They backed Brexit by 58%. They have an ageing population, 28% are over 65, and unemployment is low. But this by-election is not just about the policies. This is Conservative heartland, the rural agricultural southwest. It should be an easy win for the Conservatives. But talking to people on the streets of Tiverton and Honiton today, it's not the policies they're so concerned with, it's the man.
Partygate just exemplifies the attitude that seems to be that rules are for poor people, not for the governing body.
Fair enough, give them a fine. That's it. Don't have to be such a big thing and a big, oh, they've done wrong.
We need a very strong leader and one that will get things going, such as Boris Johnson did with the vaccines and all of those issues. You also need someone with integrity. And so that's why I haven't decided yet.
There's residue too from the resignation of their former MP, Neil Parish.
Extremely bad. Watching pornography when he should have been doing something else. He was supposed to be watching tractors, but he wasn't watching about tractors.
Well, I wouldn't lump together a whole party based on the acts of one individual, so I'm glad that he's no longer in Parliament. But yeah, I feel like the Conservatives is the main vote for like the Brexit supporting people.
We asked Labour and the Conservatives to talk to us. Both candidates said they're far too busy today meeting voters to talk to us. Well, busy they might be. The Conservatives have a 24,000 majority, but the Lib Dems are snapping at their heels, and that's making them anxious. At the Lib Dem campaign HQ, foot soldiers have been drafted in, and the party faithful are buoyed by an internal poll that puts them level pegging with the Tories.
The first thing people tend to want to talk about is Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. People often want to talk about issues of a lack of honesty and integrity at the top of politics. And it's not about Partygate per se, it's more around what that represents. It's more about lies told to Parliament and the resignation of ethics advisors, for example.
At the last election, just 15% voted for the Lib Dems, 60% went to the Conservatives. Turning this around will be a gargantuan feat for the Liberals. They think they can do it. The voters aren't so sure.
Well, what's the alternative? Put it that way. I can't see an alternative at the moment. They're giving Boris a pretty hard time and he doesn't deserve it. By and large, he's doing OK.
And that's the question that people here are asking themselves. Is OK enough? Or is Partygate now just water under the bridge? Jeff Moody, GB News.
Really does look beautiful this time of year.
Gorgeous.
As Jeff was saying in his VT, we did offer the Conservatives and the Labour candidates the opportunity to be interviewed for the report, but they both declined.
Though there are 8 candidates standing there in Tiverton and Honiton, and here they come.
Jordan Donoghue Morgan for the Heritage Party.
Andy Fone for Reform UK.
Richard Ford for the Liberal Democrats.
Helen Herford for the Conservatives.
Liz Poll for Labour.
Frankie Ruffalo for the Britain Movement.
Ben Walker for UKIP.
And Jill Westcott, Green Party.
Now, on to the developing story this morning. In the last hour, we had new inflation figures being released by the Office for National Statistics, and they've risen to 9.1. That's up just 0.1% from April. However, that's not as high as some experts had been predicting. Let's get some analysis from our economics and business editor, Liam.
Little did we think that we'd be sitting here and saying, oh, it's only 9.1% inflation, that's all right. Okay, not as bad as we thought. Phew.
It's going to go higher. The Bank of England says inflation's going to go higher. In fact, that 9.1% number, Isabel, that is the headline consumer price index number. But if we put some other measures of inflation up there on the screen, there it is, the CPI. That's the one the Bank of England targets. Its target's actually 2%, so we're more than 4 times bigger. An alternative measure is the retail price index. That's the RPI. That was up 11.1%, so much higher. That's what things like train ticket increases are linked to. Council tax increases can be linked to that. Mobile phone contracts can be linked to that, and so on, though the government denies it's an official number. But I think the really interesting one, the nerdy one, if you like, but the one that points to future inflation, is the producer price index, which I mentioned an hour ago as the numbers came out. That's up 22.1% from May this year compared to May last year. That's the price that businesses pay for the stuff they need to make and provide the goods and services that they then sell to us. So I'm talking raw material, I'm talking the inputs, and that high producer price index, the highest for 45 years, points to further inflation down the track.
So that could be anything. That could be cars you're talking about. That could be building materials.
It's those semiconductors. It's the timber that the builders use when they build you a new kitchen. It's beer that the publicans buy when they are restocking their cellars. It's food that restaurants need in order to
sure as heck you're going to be paying for that.
In the end, I'm not saying the whole amount of it will be passed on, because businesses try to absorb. That's what competition does. It makes them compete with each other, hopefully. But at least some of that increase in those producer prices, Eamonn, not a statistic you're going to hear widely on national television and radio today, but for me, it's the most important statistic.
OK. Liam, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. The time is 16 minutes now past 8 o'clock, and let's bring you up to date with the latest news situation.
The Justice Secretary, Dominic Raab, is introducing a new Bill of Rights to Parliament later today. If passed, the legislation will make the UK Supreme Court the ultimate decision-maker, able to overrule the European Court of Human Rights' decision to block removal flights to Rwanda. We'll ask him more about that when he joins us in just under an hour's time.
A former advisor to the Labour leader warns there will be, in his words, an explosion within the party if frontbenchers are punished for joining rail picket lines. Sir Keir Starmer is believed to be considering disciplinary action after banning MPs from joining demonstrations. New research suggests that disabled households in Britain are being pushed into debt by spiralling living costs. The disability charity Sense says 54% of families are in debt and 38% are skipping meals to save money.
Now, it's Cervical Screening Awareness Week, which aims to highlight the importance of cervical cancer and why attending a screening appointment can help to prevent it. Well, here to talk more about all of that is Dr. Sarah Kyatt. Very good morning to you. Lovely to see you, looking lovely and sort of summery in your bright yellow.
Yeah,
lovely.
trying to.
So, look, we're talking about cervical screening, and I was talking about this morning with some colleagues, and one of them was saying that the cervical screening process now only really tests for the human papillomavirus rather than for abnormal cells. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is true. So HPV, the human papillomavirus, causes the vast majority of cervical cancer. And so it's been found that it's more accurate, more sensitive to test for that first. If you have the high-risk HPV virus, then you'll be tested for changing in cells. But if you don't have that virus, then that ongoing test does not need to be done.
So how often should women be getting screened, and at what sort of ages, and what's the highest risk bracket?
So the test is for between the ages of 25 to 64. Between the 25 and 49 bracket, it's tested every 3 years, and thereafter it's every 5 years. So it's that higher risk bracket that's tested 3 yearly.
And are people taking up the offer that they're getting from their GPs to come for it in general, or are a lot of people dodging them?
Well, this is what's actually really devastating to hear as a doctor, because 1 in 3 people are not taking up the offer. And we know that cervical cancer is one of the most preventable ones we have. 70% of cervical cancers can be prevented by having the screening. And if you attend regularly, it's estimated that 83% of them can be prevented.
Are there any factors that would make you higher risk or lower risk of contracting this cancer?
Well, we know that those that carry HPV are at the higher risk groups, and there are some people that are at higher risk of getting HPV. So if you started having sex at an earlier age, then that potentially can increase your risk.
And what about those people who just think the whole process is really invasive and unpleasant, and that just find it back? I mean, every 3 years is an awful long time to keep going back and having to have this sort of examination, and a lot of people complain it's uncomfortable as well.
The most commonly cited reason for people not having the HPV, not having the cervical screening, is because of embarrassment. And I think that's so upsetting, because actually, as a healthcare professional, we're there to try and put people at ease. So I really want to implore that anybody who does feel embarrassed or worried about it, please speak to your nurse or the doctor, whoever it is that's doing it for you first, to try and put you at ease. In terms of it being painful, there are some people that do find it painful. It's not meant to be a painful procedure. Is supposed to be, potentially uncomfortable. But if it is painful, then it could be for certain reasons. Maybe you need to be given certain lubrications or estrogen gels beforehand, perhaps even listening to music, or, do something like meditation beforehand to try and help.
And what about the symptoms of cervical cancer? I mean, if people have skipped their invitation for a screening and they're not quite feeling themselves, what might be some alarm bells from your point of view?
So we know that some of the symptoms can be bleeding in between your periods, bleeding after sex. Those are probably the most common of the symptoms. But I would say that if you have missed your screening, you don't have to wait for 3 years' time. Just contact your GP surgery and they can book it in for you.
OK, good advice. And I suppose, look, it's always in the back of everybody's minds when we talk about this is Jade Goody and, how tragic that was. She left behind 2 boys. And it's just, a tragic story, but a good reminder of what can happen if you don't look after this part of your health.
Cervical screening saves lives.
Fantastic. Dr. Sarah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Doctor. Looking ahead to the summer, there are festivals. Glastonbury, I think, starts today. Music festivals, sport occasions like Wimbledon next week, and lots of cultural events going on. But the Shadow Culture Secretary, Lucy Powell, says all of this is in danger unless the government takes big action over things like travel chaos and supporting businesses. Talking to her right after the weather forecast.
Good morning, I'm Aidan McGibbon from the Met Office, and it's another fine start for most of us. A beautiful day to come, sunny for the vast majority and very warm. But there's always an exception, and this time, once again, it's the north and west of Scotland, where weather fronts nearby will bring thicker cloud at times and some spots of rain. For the vast majority elsewhere, high pressure keeps things fine, keeps things sunny for the most part. and plenty of sunshine is expected across England, Wales and actually eastern Scotland, seeing much sunnier skies compared with yesterday. Northern Ireland, western and northern Scotland will keep the mostly cloudy conditions, but even here, in places, mainly inland, it will brighten up. But has to be said, it will be much cooler towards the northwest with a breeze, 15 Celsius for Stornoway, 12 for Lerwick. However, mid-20s for eastern and eastern Scotland, northeast England and high 20s towards the southeast of England. Into the evening and mostly we keep the clear skies, but again, areas of cloud, some low cloud at times and some drizzle for the likes of western Scotland, perhaps some more persistent rain for Shetland. Could be the odd shower brushing the south coast, but for many it's a clear night and it's a warm night, 16 Celsius in the south first thing Thursday, with I think further north even for Glasgow, Belfast 13 or 14 Celsius. And Thursday starts off with plenty of sunshine first thing, eastern Scotland, much of England and Wales, blue skies from the word go. There will be some showers emerging across southern counties of England into South Wales perhaps. That could have a knock-on impact for the temperatures. I think the highest temperatures expected further north into Yorkshire, 29 Celsius, for example. But cooler once again for the far northwest of Scotland. And those cooler conditions spread countrywide on Friday. A spell of rain followed and preceded by some heavy showers.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own news from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents. Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. Good to see you and good to have your company if you're listening on radio. Still to come on Breakfast this morning.
The European Court of Human Rights was responsible for blocking the asylum seekers' flight to Rwanda last week, but today Dominic Raab will introduce new legislation that could change all of that. We'll be speaking to the Deputy Prime Minister, who's also the Justice Secretary, at around 20:09.
OK, he'll tell us more on that in about 15 minutes' time. Could you forgive and forget when it comes to murder? Reva Steenkamp's father prepares to meet her killer, Oscar Pistorius, in prison. Could you do that? We'll meet a man who met his attackers through what is called restorative justice programme.
That's at 8:45. And don't forget, you can get in touch. Let us know your thoughts on any of the discussions we're having this morning. Loads of really interesting emails on a whole range of subjects this morning. Careers has really taken off as a topic. Eamonn was talking earlier about how the younger you decide what you want to do, the more likely it is you'll be able to have success. That's what Eamonn did. Chaz has got in touch. Normally I agree with almost everything Eamonn has to say. However, as a retired adult careers advisor with 20 years experience in that field, I have to say I disagree. Those who make a decision in their teens and achieve their aspirations often come to me in their 30s looking for a change of career direction. It's certainly okay to explore dreams and aspirations at the age of 10 or 12, but the majority of people need to achieve an understanding of how the real world works first.
Yeah, and the real world works by knowing what you want to do and be directionalised. I always remember going to the careers advisor at school to say I wanted to be a journalist. I sort of just looked at me. It was like, that's not on the list.
Yeah.
Oh, right. So that's the way that was. Right now, let's go to Labour's Lucy Powell here because she is the Shadow Secretary for Digital Culture, Media and Sport. And Lucy, good morning to you. Today we're talking about, I mean, the weather's very nice out and about. I hope the sun's shining around where you are there today. And you're looking forward to a summer of concerts, Glastonbury starting today, summer of culture, summer of sport, Wimbledon next week. But you have worries. You have worries that the political climate and inaction by the government may endanger these things. Tell us what you mean.
Absolutely. Well, yes, it is sunny here in Manchester, and I hope it remains sunny for Glastonbury over the weekend and Wimbledon into next week. But as you say, I mean, we have a fantastic summer ahead of us. All the things that we celebrate that we're known for around the world, things like Glastonbury, Wimbledon. We're hosting the Euro women's finals this summer and the Commonwealth Games. And these are huge attractions to the tourism industry, they're for hospitality, and in themselves, are very important to the economy. But given that we're coming out of COVID in that sense, that many events of this scale, they're a year, 2 years in the planning. And obviously this time last year, many of them weren't sure whether they could still happen. So we're seeing fewer festivals, fewer events taking place this year, partly because the government's insurance scheme that they put in place last year wasn't fit for purpose. So hardly anybody has taken that scheme up to allow these events to go ahead. We've got real problems with touring musicians' visas, which the government have been promising to sort out now for 2 years. They still haven't. So it's really hard for musicians to come to this country and to tour, be the UK part of their sort of touring leg as well. And businesses, are really facing that cost of living crunch as well. And so we want to see some more support for small businesses and for businesses that are going to be struggling still over this summer.
I think it's interesting what you're pointing out, because you're making me stop and realise that a lot of these events, we think, it'll come to us. We can't be guaranteed the Commonwealth Games are necessarily going to come back in just a few years' time, or certain concerts or certain artists, as you say there, would decide to use the UK as a base for a concert tour, for instance. So we've got to take this seriously, and because it's worth a lot of money, obviously.
Huge amount of money for our economy, and it filters right through, because it's not just the events themselves, it's all the tourism that it brings for many of our tourist industries, the hospitality sector as well, and getting people back to our city centres and other places too, outside of those city centres. So it's really important. And the UK has often been the place to hold such events and to celebrate such big events as well. But they're really under the crunch at the moment. And of course, all the disruption with our airports, strikes on the railways as well. This is not the best sort of advert for our country at this point in time either.
At the train stations.
Sorry, I missed that last bit there.
Have you been on the picket lines for the rail workers?
I was actually driving yesterday because I was having to get myself back from London, like many other people, on the roads instead, which was, it was incredibly disruptive, the strikes yesterday. So I wasn't, I wasn't on a picket line myself.
But are you against being on the picket line? I mean, the only reason I raised the question is your boss says you're not to go.
Well, what Keir Starmer, I think, rightly wants to do is firstly avoid what the government want this to turn into, which is a period of strife and division, trying to pit the country against one another, and especially trying to make these strikes an issue for the Labour Party, when actually these strikes sit squarely at the responsibility of the government and not on the Labour Party. And also, I think what he's determined to do is show that we are capable ourselves of being a party of government. That's what we aspire to do. And were we in government right now, it would be our responsibility to bring everybody back round the table, to get these negotiations firmly underway and settled and resolved, so that the disruption that we've seen over the last few days doesn't continue, and that people can get a fair pay for doing the decent, skilled work that they do, and the travelling public can get back to getting on the railways as well. So when you aspire to be in government, you have to walk the walk to some extent as well.
Yeah, but as the party of the workers, you surely wouldn't be against manning picket lines. You don't think it's a strange stance for your leader to take, since 25 of your colleagues have decided, including 3 frontbenchers, to do just that?
Well, look, we are very much the party of working people. That's what we work towards. That's what we campaign for. That's what we vote in Parliament for. And that's what we propose policies about every single day. We've got a really radical programme of improved workers' rights and conditions. We want to see decent pay in our economy, which has been pay has been stagnant now for 10 years or more, and real living standards have been falling. That was before all these inflationary pressures. We called for a windfall tax on excess profits to ensure that ordinary working people got help with their energy bills. We are very clear about whose side we are on and what we are for as a party. But I'm in the shadow cabinet. I'm a parliamentarian. I have other means at my disposal. That's what the Labour Party was set up for, is to have parliamentary representation so that we could affect change in Parliament, in government, in the country as parliamentarians. And it's for trade unions and the trade union members to engage in their own industrial action and to try and negotiate and get a better deal from their employers. And it's our responsibility to ensure that the policy framework is as supportive as that as possible for them to get fair and decent pay.
Fair and decent pay is a very interesting point there, because a lot of the events you're talking about, they rely on casual labour. They may also have relied on a lot of labour which previously would have taken in from the European Union. And the hospitality industry is suffering. I mean, you take concerts, you take trying to get staff to man the bars, to man the food stalls, to be there showing people to their seats, all that sort of thing. It's a big factor, and the whole travel chaos, it's a bad look at the minute, and we've gone into that. What would you do to put that right?
Well, absolutely. We're seeing huge labour market pressures at the moment, some sectors in particular. And that's why I think in many of those sectors, pay is going up, not in the public sector so much, but in other sectors, because there is more competition for those workers. We could still do a great deal more in helping to skill people up and give them the options of going into work. And we have seen during the pandemic, and I think this is what we're seeing at the airports and in other sectors, we've seen a lot of people leave the workforce altogether, particularly people in their sort of 40s and 50s who are now decided sort of not to work for one reason or another, or to change their lifestyle. So we could be doing more to enable and encourage more people come back into to the workforce as well. And when it comes to the airports and these kind of things, we really do have what we call backlog Britain now. We've got these long backlogs because our government is just not fit for purpose when it comes to clearing people's security, to enable them to work in an airport, getting a passport, getting hospital and doctor appointments and so on. We've got this huge backlog Britain now, and that's what the government should be focusing fully on, dealing with these issues, dealing with the cost of living crisis, instead of creating these false divisions and these false wars, and almost looking like they're gleefully willing along this sort of strike action and strife that we're seeing, because they think that will help them going into the next general election. And it's a party political campaign of theirs instead of putting the national interest first.
OK, Lucy Powell, we've got to leave it there. Do you agree with what Lucy Powell's had to say? She's the Shadow Secretary for Digital Culture, Media and Sport. And basically she's saying this summer season of sport and concerts and what are they called? The season, isn't it called? Your Henley and Wimbledon, Ascot, all that sort of thing as well. Are these occasions in danger because of all the chaos that is going on at the moment? Let us know your views.
We're going to take a quick break. After that, we're going to go through the papers one last time this morning with David Mellor and Claire Muldoon. See you in a sec.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio. On digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
So it's one last look through the papers this morning with Claire Muldoon and David Mellor. And David, you want to talk about human rights. It's on the front of the Times, but also inside the Sun this morning. And I know that we spoke about this last week in the context of the Rwanda flight, and you talked about your time in government and you being then suspicious of the European Court of Human Rights. But what about this plan by Dominic Raab then to, you know, essentially rewrite things, have a British Bill of Rights? I mean, the Law Society is not happy. Amnesty International is not happy with it. What do you think?
That increases the appeal, as far as I'm concerned. No, I think the reality of it is that the whole idea of the European Court of Human Rights and the whole idea of the Council of Europe was to allow fragile democracies the chance to actually sustain themselves by having institutions like the European Court of Human Rights. I don't think when Churchill and co. set this up, they ever envisaged it would come back to bite us in sensitive parts of our anatomy. The reality is we are already over-legaled. You know, there's 3 tiers of courts in the UK. You've got the First Instance Court, you've got the Court of Appeal, and you've got the Supreme Court. And of course, when is the Supreme Court not supreme? When a bunch of civil servants in the European Court of Human Rights, and that's what they are. I mean, a single judge, we do not know who, what country he came from, made the decision to pull that Rwanda flight, which, by the way, is a separate issue. I don't think they had to obey what he said, but it may have been the Russian judge. There's still a Russian judge there.
But are you satisfied, though, that in stopping those sorts of things happen, we won't water down, you know, what should be enshrined rights, the protection of human rights, particularly in relation?
But I think it's the abuse of human rights. It's, for instance, a lot of the people we're dealing with have spent their career abusing other people's human rights, rapists, murderers, and so on. And then they manage to claim that their own human rights are being violated. They have a right to a family life. They may have destroyed someone else's family life. And I just think it's all become a bit of a joke. And of course, what it means is it's almost impossible, for instance, to have an effective anti-immigration policy. I mean, I personally am not sympathetic to those who turn up on a British beach and then start to effectively jump the queue and who may not be bringing to this country any skills that we need. We're entitled to say as a country, we want someone like him because he can do that, or someone like her can do that, but we don't want this particular one. And the whole reason why they can survive in this country is because smart lawyers being paid by the taxpayer can actually go down to the courts and persuade them that these people's human rights will be violated. You know, no one asked them to turn up on a beach in Dover, but they've turned up. They now have a whole raft of rights that means we can't remove.
Yeah, so you're in favour of what the Justice Secretary's trying to do, or what he hopes to get through the House here?
Yeah, all I was going to say on that is it's not the lawyers that are bringing it. People are bringing these cases to the lawyers. Lawyers are merely doing their job. Surely, David, no?
Well, I think there's a very politicised element amongst lawyers. Yeah, of course. I mean, there is the cab rank principle where, you know, you're supposed to... But I think a number of lawyers, you know, they set themselves up as human rights lawyers.
Yeah.
Well, you know.
And yet the judges can't rule on something that they don't deem as illegal. That's the other thing, that's the other side of it that people are talking about at the moment.
Now, talking about talking, you go to the Times here, this is page 3, and there's a story here which I have a lot of sympathy with, and that is often restaurants that you go to, and this deals with London, are too noisy.
They are. London, apparently, not that noisy eaters aren't bad enough, but the noisy restaurants. London is the worst in Europe, apparently. And you wouldn't think that... Sorry, David?
I think one of those spurious statistics.
Well, no, I don't think
it
is, because this has actually been set up by a deaf guy. He set up an app after going to New York eateries because he couldn't find himself listening to what his potential date suitor was actually saying. And that's something that you touched on earlier.
I think it's the height of ceilings. I think often the posher restaurants are relocated in buildings that were not designed as restaurants.
Yeah,
they're banks and they were insurance offices and all sorts of things like that. And the ceilings are incredibly high and the noise bounces back, cutlery on the table, all that sort of thing.
That's exactly what it is, because they're saying the lack of soft furnishings that would absorb the noise, and the footfall through restaurants has lowered but is now hopefully getting back. What they've done is they've crammed more tables in. So you've actually got more people in, more people talking, plus add alcohol in. Everybody always raises their voice after having alcohol. And also, as you quite rightly said earlier, music, coffee machines, hard surfaces, hard flooring,
tablecloths and
or linens. So if we to soften it all up, then it would be much, much better, but it's not.
Coffee machines, you're right, all that...
Bang.
But anyone would think there wasn't much news around, that the Times is prepared to put a piece of blank like this on page 3.
Page 3 is always a bit of a nonsense story page in the Times.
I thought it was only in the Sun.
Well, that's a totally different kind of nonsense, No, I mean, I think it's a legitimate problem, particularly for older people. And my parents complain about this all the time. Sorry, guys.
Can't hear, what are you saying? Sorry.
Oldies like you, David.
Yeah.
But we're going for brunch after the programme. We're going to put this theory to the test with all of you and see.
Well, Eamonn's already said
goes.
He's not going to sit and say anything because he likes it quite tranquil.
What? What did you say? What?
Our job is to sit there, munch away, but quietly, and listen to Eamonn. You know this.
And you know that David's picking up the bill, don't you?
Actually, I even would for the privilege. I would.
Claire, why does the Prime Minister have a serious woman problem? This is in the Eye, and the woman problem is not so much amongst staff, it's amongst voters.
Yeah, it's a really, really insightful op-ed here by Katie Bowles. The PM has a serious women problem, well, who knew? He's got myriad of problems, I would say, and women is particularly one of them. But a recent poll in the Sunday Times have found that women are expected to vote 2-1 against Johnson in the Wakefield by-election, and some 55% of women are expected to back Labour, with compared to 42% of men. Now, in the 1970s, every single decade, up in the 70s to the 80s, women have predominantly voted Conservative, an increase on increase on increase, and now we're not having it. And this is not a Boris bashing piece. This is about the Waitrose women. This is about the the Conservative women that vote Conservative. So therefore, the affluent Conservatives prioritise high farming standards and perfectionism over cheaper food is about something else now. So women are the most closely fit description of the Waitrose women, or represent those who would tend to be those who have turned up against the Prime Minister and the Conservative Party.
But who are they in favour of? I mean, I wonder, you know, if the Labour Party were to woo them, would they be in favour of Angela Rayner? Would they be in favour of Lisa Nandy?
It's the more Lib Dem, it's the more centrist.
All right.
And not that they would vote Labour, that's the other thing. That's the other thing this piece is saying. They're politically homeless. And I don't know about you, Isabel, but I'm politically homeless as well. I wouldn't know who to vote for now because I think they're all a sham. Yeah, but, you know, that's fine. But I just don't know where to go because none of them...
We tell you where to go. What do you think?
Sorry?
I mean, I do think it's interesting that, you know, it's described as a woman problem. Boris, I thought, was supposed to be irresistible to women.
Well...
No, weird women like you. You know, you remember you used to fancy him, didn't you?
I never used to fancy him.
Weird.
I used to find him funny, and I used to think when he was Mayor of London, he had a certain charm, and that's been proven. Look at his
What
track
about that
record.
hair? How could you possibly with somebody with sit like that?
Fancying him.
If that was your child, you would have a comb. You would constantly. You know, your parents used to wet their hand and pat your hair down, whatever.
Wet hand away from me.
And lick their hand before doing
lick their hand. Yes.
You should have seen David Mellor in the green room earlier doing his own hair.
Putting it on.
David, what do you want to go to next?
Well, I think this Nobel Prize story in the Metro is quite true. This a Ukrainian but a Russian background won the Nobel Prize for his efforts, and he decided that he wanted to sell it, and he wasn't doing very well, and then suddenly, in the last couple of weeks, it ended up at £84 million, which he has now donated to Ukraine. And that is a sign, endless small signs about how much damage Russia has done to its international standing as a result of what happened. And I think it'll take, you know, that may be that Macron wants to cuddle up to Putin as quickly as he can, and so does the German Chancellor.
The German, yeah.
I think an awful lot of people will never think the same of Russia again as a result of all of this. And that's certainly true. Every opportunity that ordinary people, or ordinary extremely rich people, able to spend 84 million on a Nobel Prize, you know, they are prepared to show what their disdain for Russia.
I was disappointed to read that McDonald's had reopened in Russia, but under a different name. And I worry, as you were saying in an earlier review, that as the world's attention slightly moves on from this, and it's not on the front pages as much, whether or not, just from an economic point of view, some businesses, frankly, are creeping back in there.
Of course, it's a good market.
Yeah.
But how is it all going to end, you see? This is, I know I'm supposed to be Mystic Mellor, but his mysticity is having trouble with my crystal balls. I cannot quite work out.
Mystic Mellor.
Mystic Mellor is having trouble with my crystal balls.
Well, I think it's going to go
because
on
I don't
for
know
an
how
awfully
it's all
long...
going to end up, you see.
Yeah.
I can't see a way through this.
And that's a really sad thing, because even we were talking earlier about the rail strikes, no one can see an end to that either. No one seems to have answers anymore. Have we not devolved or evolved enough to find solutions to things? And it's the same with the opposition. Labour have got no solutions to everything. Keir Starmer et al. Will stand there and say, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do whatever. But what is the solution? They never come up and say, well, let's do this.
Don't give me the problem, give me the solution.
Well, I think the solution when it comes to Ukraine has to end with Putin. Putin has to go, and however long that might take, might be...
Exactly, but I also think the big issue is, I mean, there's always been a problem in Ukraine. One is of which we can't really cover here. One is of the extreme corruption of the Ukrainian governmental system, which is why they were never really embraced warmly by Western Europe. But more significantly in this context, the east of Ukraine is a largely Russian-dominated area. And the question is, should they cede land for peace? Now, a lot of people will feel Putin doesn't deserve any kind of victory. Yeah. But equally, how's it going to end if that doesn't happen?
You sound like Macron now. You like to offer some sort of...
You think I sound like Monsieur Macron? I would be very impressed if I did.
Giving him some sort of face-saving way out to cede the east of the country.
Well, I mean, there is a very interesting realpolitik view on this, and that is when a country is as armed to the teeth as Russia and a leader is as mad as that particular Russian snake, you cannot expect any absolute victory over him. You've just got to find some way of throwing him a bone or two. And the problem is, already, effectively, bits of eastern Ukraine were self-governing, Donbass area and so on. And I just don't know whether the integrity of the country of Ukraine, with so much Russian settlements in the east, is going to be able, we're not going to be able to sort of keep things going on that basis.
And whether or not that would be enough to satisfy Putin. Would that not, it would be appeasement, arguably. He would then feel emboldened to perhaps invade again at another time and cede some other part of the country, or indeed another one of the countries in the region.
I mean, it's nothing like what he was expecting, but when you now see him forming up to the Baltic states, and this business that keeps on appearing, this idea that basically there was a Russian empire and it was lost by the collapse of the Soviet Union. He wants it back. And this idea that some of these countries that have got independence subsequent to this, that they are actually really part of Russia, and Russia can take them back whenever they want. This is a dangerous, but seems to be what all the broadcasters that support Putin on these ghastly Russian networks.
How does he, David, continue to fund that dream? I mean, even Russia must get into a financial pickle in terms of armament and what they're spending for this war, and how the international economic sanctions are biting.
How right you are. In fact, we looked at it, I think, last week, didn't we? That a 12.5% fall, it's estimated, in the Russian GDP. And even the Russians' own figures suggest that it's going to be 7.5%. That's a catastrophic fall, actually. A catastrophic fall.
Let's talk, Claire, finally, shall we, about the story inside the Telegraph that you've chosen about vegan food. And Kellogg's has decided to sell fake meat.
Yeah, well, they're selling off the fake meat unit. Apparently, I mean, veganism has always been, a bone of contention for me, because I really don't see that. So to speak. Yeah, exactly. No pun very much intended. Glad you got that. So we had this massive big drive to be meat-free, have meat-free Mondays or meat-free whatever. Well, the trend is actually going down, and the Office of National Statistics actually used the price of vegan sausages in their economic basket and to value inflation as a growth.
So what is a vegan sausage, actually? What would it be? Is it?
Well, I see. This is an interesting point, because what it would be is a lot of vegetables got up to look and taste like meat. This is where I don't get it. I mean, I quite enjoy a vegetarian meal, but what I don't want is a burger that is actually not meat. But I mean, why on earth do people feel that though they're vegan, though they want to be vegetarians, they will only eat stuff that appears to be meat? But come on, it is weird, don't you think?
It might be weird, but I think
animal welfare, maybe.
Yeah, if you take a decision on an ethical basis, but you actually enjoyed the taste and pleasure of eating meat. All these incredible substitutes, and they really are amazing now that they actually, in many ways, look.
But Isabel, it's not the share prices have all gone down, and it's not working.
It's not the thing.
So we were told to buy into this whole thing. That would save the earth. All these walking.
I've never ever had one. I wouldn't have
one. It's not too bad, but I do love the real deal.
Well, yeah, exactly. What, the real deal?
Yeah,
so do I. Everyone does, I think. So not the vegan thingy.
Well, thank you two for being the real deal for us today. We look forward to the next time. Claire Muldoon, David Mellor, always a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Stay with us after the break, where we're talking about all the rest of today's news and hopefully speaking to Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab around 9:20. Stay with us.
Good morning, I'm Eamonn McGivern from the Met Office, and it's another fine start for most of us. A beautiful day to come, sunny for the vast majority and very warm. But there's always an exception, and this time, once again, it's the north and west of Scotland, where weather fronts nearby will bring thicker cloud at times and some spots of rain. For the vast majority elsewhere, high pressure keeps things fine, keeps things sunny for the most part. And plenty of sunshine is expected across England, Wales and actually eastern Scotland, seeing much sunnier skies compared with yesterday. Northern Ireland, western and northern Scotland will keep the mostly cloudy conditions, but even here, in places, mainly inland, it will brighten up. But has to be said, it will be much cooler towards the northwest with a breeze, 15 Celsius for Stornoway, 12 for Lerwick. However, mid-20s for eastern Scotland, northeast England, and high 20s towards the southeast of England. Into the evening, and mostly we keep the clear skies, but again, areas of cloud, some low cloud at times, and some drizzle for the likes of western Scotland, perhaps some more persistent rain for Shetland. Could be the odd shower brushing the south coast, but for many it's a clear night and it's a warm night, 16 Celsius in the south first thing Thursday, with I think further north even for Glasgow, Belfast 13 or 14 Celsius. And Thursday starts off with plenty of sunshine first thing, eastern Scotland, much of England and Wales, blue skies from the word go. There will be some showers emerging across southern counties of England into South Wales perhaps. That could have a knock-on impact for the temperatures. I think the highest temperatures expected further north into Yorkshire, 29 Celsius for example. But cooler once again for the far northwest of Scotland, and those cooler conditions spread countrywide on Friday. A spell of rain followed and preceded by some heavy showers.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
it's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
The Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer faces a mutiny as members of his own party joined the strike picket yesterday ahead of two crucial by-elections tomorrow.
A very good morning to you. The time is 9 o'clock. It is a Wednesday morning, the 22nd of June. Thank you for tuning in to breakfast on GB News with me, Eamonn Holmes, and Isabel Webster.
Here's what's leading our news this morning. Sir Keir Starmer is facing a mutiny in his own party after 25 of his MPs, including 3 shadow frontbenchers, broke ranks to join RMT picket lines. The Prime Minister said yesterday the strikes were wrong and unnecessary and called for a return to the negotiating table.
It comes ahead of 2 major electoral tests for the Conservative Party with by-elections in Red Wall seat Wakefield and Tory stronghold Tiverton and Honiton. Our reporters will have all the latest from both those constituencies very, very shortly.
Inflation figures have been released this morning, 9.1%. That's a 0.1 increase from April. Not as high, perhaps, as experts predicted, but we'll discover exactly what it means for you.
You can join in any of our discussions this morning. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk, and you've been doing that this morning. Some lovely vile comments coming in. People very, very angry. I'm reading it. Sometimes, you know, people think I'm stupid, but a lot of you are very stupid as well, it has to be said. Lucy Powell still didn't answer Eamonn Holmes' question about Keir Starmer banning MPs on the picket line, says Mr. Back Boris Johnson, which you all seem to do. Incidentally, you're not allowed to criticise Boris's hair, right? There's nothing odd or wrong about his hair either. But just to say here that I think it was quite obvious that Lucy Powell didn't answer the question. That's all that was needed. I asked the question twice. She didn't answer it. I think she's hung by her own petard. That's the way it works, I think. But, you know, then that's just me. You can tweet us at GB News as well. If anybody's got anything nice to say, it would be very, very nice.
Lots of nice things coming in too, let me assure you.
Oh, good. Right. And you can subscribe to GB News
Most of them saying, I agree with Eamonn, I agree with Eamonn, I agree with Eamonn. Anyway, I'll stop bigging you up. We're going to be back with you in a sec.
Story this morning is the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer. Well, OK, what's going to happen to him? He said in these crucial by-elections, he was saying about the real strikes yesterday, saying to his MPs, don't go to the picket lines, but 25 did, including 3 shadow front benchers. Where is Keir Starmer today? Where is he yesterday? Nobody can ever see. Maybe he's on a picket line. Who knows, wherever he is.
MQs a little bit later.
But here to talk about that and all the big stories of the day, former Home Office Minister, Mr. Norman Baker. Norman, he's got a situation here. He's saying, don't do this. I'm telling you right from the top. 25 of them do it, including 3 front benches. What does he do about it?
Well, look, Labour always has difficulty with strikes for obvious reasons because of its links with the unions. But the standard lesson for a party leader is don't give an instruction if you think it's going to be broken by a large number of your own party. So he's created an own goal, I'm afraid, for himself by the way he's undertaken this. It's difficult for Labour, but the sensible line is to say that the strike shouldn't be happening, but not to stop people going on the picket line if that's what he thinks. And he's turned this into a Labour story, judging by your news and everybody else's news, rather than a story about the RMT or about the government.
But you see, call me old-fashioned. I would have thought if I do vote, and I don't vote for any of them, any of you, I would think, well, Labour is the party of the workers. If I was looking for representation, I was looking for workers and job protection. Yes. They're the people who I would go to.
Well, indeed. And if you look at what Keir Starmer said when he was elected as Labour leader, he was talking about standing shoulder to shoulder with the unions. That's his pitch when he got elected by his own MPs. So there's a charge of hypocrisy, I'm afraid, here as well. So he's not handled this very well. And, of course, this is by-election week. We'll come on to that perhaps in a moment. But, you know, it's not certain that Labour will win Wakefield. It's really not certain.
Well, I mean, let's talk about the by-elections in a second. Before we move away from the issue of the strikes, I want to know where you stand on it, because, of course, you were a former Transport Secretary. We've got more negotiations happening today, more strike action happening tomorrow and again on Saturday. I mean, is it reasonable to expect 7% in the current climate? And also, we'll come on to pensions in a minute.
It's reasonable to reform working practices in the railway, which are very out of date and sort of should have been changed 50 years ago, to be honest with you, some of the stuff that goes on. So the government's got a point. It's also got a point to say that £16 billion has been put in over COVID and the numbers haven't returned to the railway. All that's very fair. The RMT have got a point to say that people deserve a fair increase, not a pun, sorry, an increase in their salary beyond the kind of wage freeze they've had. So there's justice on both sides. The difficulty, I think, that I see is that you've got people on extremes, both in the government and in the unions, who actually quite like the idea of a battle. We had Arthur Scargill on the picket line yesterday, and we could do without that, quite frankly. And we want to get the trains back.
Arthur Scargill's still around,
He's still around. Yes, and Arthur Scargill, of course, you know, the history of Arthur Scargill is he started in the 1980s with a very, very big union in a very small house, ended up with a very, very large house and a very small union. So he did his miners no favours at all. And, you know, I'm worried about Mick Lynch doing the same for the RMT. There's a case there for the RMT, of course there is. There's a case for the government. So with a bit of sense, there's no reason why a deal shouldn't be made. And the deal that can be struck is where there's a basic pay increase of about 3%, which is what I think the Treasury will allow, plus you then release a whole lot of money from getting rid of ancient working practices, And the money that's released from that can be put into pay. That's the deal, obviously.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but you would feel pretty Judas-like with that, wouldn't you? Say, like, I'll get a 5% pay rise as long as my mate Norman gets the sack.
Well, no one's going to get the sack, as far as I'm aware, on the rail, which what they're talking about, Network Rail, is talking about voluntary redundancies. I understand, in fact, there are queues of people wanting to leave the railway, and therefore there's no reason why anyone should lose their job if they want to stay on the railway. There's no reason why. And indeed, Mick Lynch talks about safety. One of the proposals Network Rail's got is to do what other European countries is doing, which is to use drones to look at the condition of the rail track. That's actually safer than sending men out on the track.
There have been a lot of fatalities there, men who actually have to do that job.
There have, absolutely. I mean, we don't have passenger fatalities anymore, thank goodness, very, very few anyway. But we do have fatalities of our rail workers, and clearly we should try and minimise that.
The problem, I suppose, is that, as you say, there are these extremes on both sides, and there is this sort of potential, as Boris Johnson's warning the front of the Times this morning, that this could go on for months and months. Huge costs to an already ailing economy that's trying to recover from lockdowns, from everything else, going into this cost of living crisis with the cost of fuel. It's facing recession. I mean, it's not a good outlook.
Well, I'm not sure it will go on for months, and I think that they are making progress behind the scenes, as I understand it, between Network Rail and the unions. There's a separate discussion going on between the train companies and the unions about booking officers and so on, which is more difficult, actually. But I think the Network Rail side might be sorted out reasonably soon. But it doesn't help the Prime Minister talk about union barons. It's a very pejorative phrase. It doesn't help the situation. And it doesn't help the situation either, what I see in the eye today. The government's relaxing the rules on city bosses' pay.
Yeah,
I mean, this is just...
This is gross. This is obscene.
What a tin ear they've got. I mean...
What a tin ear. And give people the figures that we're talking about there. I mean, you're talking about tens of millions in terms of just the bonus, not the basic pay.
Yeah, I mean, this is obscene, actually. Yeah. This is what used to be called the unacceptable face of capitalism.
Yeah.
And to do this at a time when people are struggling very hard, when public sector workers are being told they've got to price themselves into work. These guys, apparently, city bosses need an incentive, but people in the public sector need to price themselves into work. That's not a very happy message to send out.
Do you know, I spent 11 days in hospital in Belfast a few weeks ago, and unexpectedly. And I sat and I talked to the staff around me, whether they were auxiliaries, whether they were nurses, staff nurses, whether doctors, whatever it is. And Norman, I could honestly say, as I was lying in my bed talking to them, not one of them do it for the money.
No.
Not one of them do it for the money. When you ask them how much they earn and whatever, and you suddenly are stunned by how average it is.
Yes, that's right.
You really think they are better people than me because they're not doing this for their ego, for exposure, for extra money, whatever it is. They're doing it because they love the job and they want to serve.
That's exactly right. And actually, if you look at the rail workers, some of the government talks about the train drivers. The train drivers aren't on strike. The people who are on strike are the guards and the conductors who are earning £30,000 a year. You know, that's where they are on the salary scale.
Yeah. Do you know what, but I often look, and I'm very appreciative of most people's jobs, and you think what they do, whether you're a guard or whether you're a driver, and oddly enough, it may be the drivers whose jobs may be most at risk eventually with new technology and things like that. Drivers, they want pilotless planes, you know, so the trains are going to be an easy option for them.
I think that's a long way away, hopefully.
Just not sure it is, but the public reaction to that. But, however, you know, people who with the trolley up and down, so say you're going London to Leeds, up and down, up and down, up and down. Gosh, it must be like being on a boat. It must be like being seasick, whatever, you know. Just constantly pouring tea, your hand shaking over that. And it is a skill, and my respect to anybody who does it. And I think the public in general have a sympathy with people who are on low wages and do tough work and long shifts. But, as we were discussing yesterday, it's the inconvenience, isn't it, for people?
And what of the disruption caused? And ordinary working people as well, also very often on low wages that are being impacted, nurses, even kids who aren't, you know, just life chances being...
I think the unions have jumped the gun, to be honest with you. I mean, they could have got a mandate for a strike and then not gone ahead with it pending talks. They didn't have got on strike this week.
I think they're going to get 5%.
I think they are. I think they're going to get 4.5%, 5%, 3% from the Treasury uplift, and then the rest will come from genuine productivity gains.
I really want to just pick your brains before we let you go on this Bill of Rights that Dominic Raab wants to put before.
Matter of fact, stay with us while he's on.
We're going to be talking to him in a few minutes about it. Interestingly, David Mellor, big fan of the idea, had no problem with getting rid of the jurisdiction of the European Court of Human Rights, which would have allowed that flight to head off to Rwanda. What's your take on it?
Well, look, the European Court of Human Rights, which is not related to the EU, of course, always worth saying that, was partly created by this country. And we did so after the Second World War in order to enshrine democracy and ensure that governments could not abuse their citizens. That's why it was set up, to give a basic level of protection. And that protection is important, not just for people in Kosovo or anywhere else, but also for people in Britain. And, we get rid of these things at our peril. And, this is, I'm afraid, part of the government's approach. Anyone who criticises the government, whether it's the judges or the House of Lords or Parliament or the European Court, has to be kind of pushed out of the way. We need accountability in a democracy.
This is very popular, what Rob is
Well, it may well
proposing. It seems to be very popular because people see them, whoever they are, standing in the way of us.
Well, they may see that, but that's not actually an accurate description of how things are.
Except that if the flight was OK in 3 courts here in the UK, and that's the highest level of justice in this country, why is that not good enough for the European Court of Human Rights? A lot of people would argue that's still protecting rights, that's still protecting the rule of law, British rule of law.
Well, I mean, there's 2 aspects. One is the specific case that you're talking about, which I think the European Court decided that it should not be allowed until such time as there had been a judicial review in this country, in our courts. That's why they took the view they did. It wasn't to say that it should never happen. It was to say that the process in Britain hadn't been completed yet. But, if we get rid of the European Court of Human Rights, this may be an issue where people agree with the government, disagree with the European Court. But suppose there's something else happens. Suppose the government of the day decides in this country, take away our liberties. Where do we go then? We actually need the European Court of Human Rights to protect ourselves.
See, it's interesting, Dominic Raab, and I'm going to ask him this. I mean, he will paint this one way. He will say, this is our Bill of Rights. And as I say, that will go down well with the audience. But there are people, and perhaps you're one of them, who would say, actually, what he's doing is introducing anti-human rights legislation.
I think he is. And I also think that in a democracy, you have to have a devolution of power, and that you don't concentrate power in too much power in one person's hands or one institution's hands. That's why it's important we have a free press. It's important why we have an independent judiciary. It's important that Parliament has power. It's important that the European Court is there as a backstop. All these things work to make democracy work. If you take away the power of the press or the power of Parliament, as is happening actually a bit, you end up with a government which actually becomes a dictatorship of some sort.
It brought me on to another subject. Julian Assange.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, is he the freedom of the press, or is he just a deranged nutcase? Or what do you think? Was it what he did or the way he did it?
Well, look, I mean, I think he's a very damaged character, as a matter of fact. Look, I mean, some of the stuff that he revealed, we should have known. And then, in that sense, it was a public duty he performed. But he was indiscriminate. He released details about serving agents and endangered their lives. He was irresponsible in that sense. He's also, he didn't really respond very well to the Ecuadorian embassy, which hosted him for many years. And he kind of betrayed them as well in some of the actions he took.
So you think he should be extradited?
I don't think he should be extradited. I'm not in favour of extradition.
But it's hard to defend.
But I think you should. It's just hard to defend.
Yeah.
I think if he is extradited, there should be a guarantee that he's not subject to the death penalty, which is what we don't have in this country, the Americans do.
Yes. Norman, always fascinating listening to you and your take on things. Thank you. Enjoyed that very much indeed.
Can I have a line on this before you go on?
Yes, go ahead. What is this?
This is my favourite story of the day. For sale, 3 Tory Prime Ministers. Yeah.
This is a dinner.
This is the world's worst dinner party. Buy 1, get 2 free. And if you're going to pay £120,000 to go and have dinner with Boris Johnson, Theresa May and David Cameron, I mean, the only value in going along there is because Boris Johnson and Theresa May can't stand each other. The chemistry would be interesting.
None of them like each other.
They hate each other.
But as you say, you'll be looking for your guests to sit between them, won't you?
Keep them apart.
Yeah, very
Pay
good.
good money to
and it went for what? How much did it go for?
£120,000 according to the Daily Mirror.
Oh gosh! As long as I hope it wasn't from a Russian donor.
Well, it may well have been because there is a Russian mentioned there who's the biggest female political donor in the UK, who's paid to play tennis with both Boris Johnson and David Cameron. But there we are, game, set, and match for the Tory fundraising machine.
Well, we'd have dinner with people for charity, wouldn't we? It'd cost you £5 each or something like that, probably. But be all right. We're good. We're good crack.
We're
good company. Yeah, what time is it? 60 minutes now past 9.
Coming up, we're going to be talking about restorative justice as well as speaking to the Justice Secretary, funnily enough, Dominic Raab. That's after this.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
it's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Now, this is really interesting. Could you find it in yourself to forgive someone that killed a loved one? Or would you
No.
be able... No, I mean, it's a really interesting debate.
I'll answer that now easily. No.
I think I could, but I don't know. I hope
Really?
I never find out. I don't know, but I think I maybe could. Look, the former South African Olympic athlete, Oscar Pistorius, who, of course, famously, horrendously or infamously shot and killed his former girlfriend...
Couldn't forgive him.
9 years ago, he's set to meet with her father through the Restorative Justice Programme. This is where victims and perpetrators are brought together in order to heal and move on from a crime.
But anyway, it's got a lot of you wondering how easy would it be to forgive and forget. Jacob Dunn, we're going to introduce you to now. Jacob, if we can see him, there he is. There's Jacob. Good morning, Jacob. Jacob.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Not at all, Jacob. We're fascinated to hear your story and the restorative justice scheme. Jacob, you killed a paramedic or a trainee paramedic, and his name was James Hodgkinson. It was in a fight, and, you know, we can go into that and we can talk about the detail, but, you know, you then go on to befriend that man's mother, James' mother, through this restorative justice programme, and you are now a restorative justice campaigner. Fascinated to hear your story and fascinated to know what it was like to meet that man's mother and how tense the initial meeting may have been.
Yeah, just to include that I was also met James's father as well.
Okay.
And we spoke through mediation for about 2.5 years before we actually felt ready to meet face to face. And in that 2.5 years, I laid out my plans for changing the error of my ways, doing the best that I can to repair the harm that I caused with a single punch, which I'll never be able to do. But you know, the best thing I can do is to try, and that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years.
Well, I mean, no one can but applaud you for doing that. A brave thing to do, and well done for doing it. But I'm interested in taking us back, if you don't mind, to the day of the fight with James, you know, how quickly you realised that you had cost someone their life and how quickly that anger turned to remorse. Was that a slow thing for you or was it instant?
It went from anger to remorse quite quickly, actually. As I said early on in my process, I felt like I was the one that was unfortunate, which I think you find a lot of the time in the criminal justice system, the population, that, you know, they're hard done by, and they've been dealt a bad set of cards, which, you know, probably is a fair assessment for many people in there. But that still doesn't give you the right to feel as if you're a victim and that you don't need to be accountable for your actions. And so that was the wake-up call for me, thankfully, was hearing the courage of James's parents to say, you know what, we want to hold you account. We want to reclaim our power. And that was it, really. That's where it all started, the main shift for me.
So James, you spent 2 years you know, before that meeting with the parents, Jacob, before you met James's parents, and you obviously built up a relationship with them and they decided that they wanted to meet you and to forgive you. Walk us through the moment you met them, you looked into their eyes. What were the words that you said to them? What was James's mother's response to you?
From the very start, I've always said that I didn't want to look them in the eyes and say, sorry kind of seems like it's not good enough, and so I looked them in the eyes when we met eventually, and just told them that I will always continue to do what I have already been doing, and that I will respect their wishes throughout the whole process, and continue to do what I was doing.
Did you mean to kill their boy? For that split second, was it in your mind, I want to kill you, I want to inflict the optimum amount of harm on you? How and why did he die? What did you think? You just wanted to strike him, or what happened? What went wrong?
Well, unfortunately, which is the case with a lot of young men involved in, you know, like group gang culture, or when you've just had too many to drink, your friend gets in a little bit of an argument with someone and you feel like it's your responsibility to protect your friend, or to try and, I think what I was aiming to do was to try and get a bit more respect and acknowledgement from my friends via supporting them with violence, which is completely irrational and makes no sense to anybody listening. But unfortunately, we have that peer pressure within a lot of young men where they feel that they have to do that. So it was more of a symbolic act, the punch itself.
I mean, well explained, Jacob. Well explained. But you've made peace with the parents, right? Have you made peace with yourself? I mean, you will always have to live with this. Where are you at in judging yourself over this?
It's a continual, ongoing process, to be honest. Sometimes I feel awful and overwhelmed, and other times, you know, I have good days where, you know, it might not, you know, I might not think about it too much, but it's always kind of there looming in the background, and I just try to use it as a positive tool now, as to kind of, you know, give me motivation as opposed to make me depressed. But it's a fine balance, I guess.
If you hadn't have met James's parents, if they hadn't have forgiven you, do you think that you would have been able to get yourself back on your feet after this tragedy?
I like to think that I had enough about me, and you know, my mother instilled enough good values within me growing up to make the right decisions eventually. But it's difficult to say, really. I don't think I was on a trajectory where, you know, much good was going to come. So I'm just grateful that you know, I was able to no longer harm myself or anybody else moving forward, and I've broke the cycle of violence and incarceration that so many people get stuck in.
Respect you for talking to us today. People will have their own views. You've stated your case very, very well, Jacob Dunn. Thank you very much indeed for your time and your story this morning, and obviously in remembrance still of James Hodgkinson. who died in 2011, and his parents. Our condolences to them. gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet us at gbnews.
That's all we've got time for. We were expecting the Justice Secretary. We're being told that he will be available, but in a few minutes, so stay tuned our way, and hopefully Tom Harwood will be able to talk to him shortly on the briefing. We'll be back at 6 o'clock.
Good morning, I'm Eamonn McGivern from the Met Office, and it's another fine start for most of us. A beautiful day to come, sunny for the vast majority and very warm. But there's always an exception, and this time, once again, it's the north and west of Scotland, where weather fronts nearby will bring thicker cloud at times and some spots of rain. For the vast majority elsewhere, high pressure keeps things fine, keeps things sunny for the most part, and plenty of sunshine is expected across England, Wales, and actually eastern Scotland seeing much sunnier skies compared with yesterday. Northern Ireland, western and northern Scotland will keep the mostly cloudy conditions, but even here, in places, mainly inland, it will brighten up. But has to be said, it will be much cooler towards the northwest with a breeze, 15 Celsius for Stornoway, 12 for Lerwick. However, mid-20s for eastern and eastern Scotland, northeast England, and high 20s towards the southeast of England. Into the evening, and mostly we keep the clear skies, but again, areas of cloud, some low cloud at times, and some drizzle for the likes of western Scotland, perhaps some more persistent rain for Shetland. Could be the odd shower brushing the south coast, but for many it's a clear night and it's a warm night, 16 Celsius in the south first thing Thursday, with I think further north even for Glasgow, Belfast, 13 or 14 Celsius. And Thursday starts off with plenty of sunshine first thing, eastern Scotland, much of England and Wales, blue skies from the word go. There will be some showers emerging across southern counties of England into South Wales perhaps. That could have a knock-on impact for the temperatures. I think the highest temperatures expected further north into Yorkshire, 29 Celsius, for example. But cooler once again for the far northwest of Scotland. And those cooler conditions spread countrywide on Friday. A spell of rain followed and preceded by some heavy